Alright, we're back. I'm not quite sure what music to listen to today. Maybe some YouTube vids in the background or something. Warlock in Season of Discovery could take your tank spot over my fucking dead Shaman tank body.
The Warlock in Season of Discovery looks like it's shaping up to be something pretty special. Going from the Shadow Bolt spam in Turret in Classic era to now in Season of Discovery having multiple options in terms of how you'll deal damage, be it primarily with Shadow spells or primarily with Fire spells, and you're even now going to have the ability to tank. Now, we know over the years Warlocks have been used as tanks for things like Twins in AQ or Leo in Black Temple, among others, but now they've got dedicated tank runes that actually make them pretty mental. And looking at it just in its phase 1 state, I see it as a legit option as a primary tank in all fights. The choice of what rune combinations you can run as a Warlock is actually incredibly interesting and really varied, and like I've said with many of the other classes, the ones I really like the look of in Season of Discovery are the ones where it's hard to decide between multiple runes in a single slot. And Warlock is definitely one of those, where actually the runes synergize together really, really well, and it might not be as obvious which ones to use as it might seem when you first look. We're going to look at all the runes that you're going to get as a Warlock, and there's 12 in total spread across the chest, legs and gloves. Before we get into that though, just a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, FlexiSpot. If you don't own a mechanical desk, then you won't know what you're missing. FlexiSpot recently sent me the brand new E7 Pro mechanical desk, which has a cable tray for cable management, which I've not finished doing the cable management yet, alright, so don't judge me. It has presets so you can save the exact height you want the desk set to for either sitting or standing, so it's one press of a button to go into the perfect position. And the best thing about it is the anti-collision safety feature. So if you happen to leave your chair under the desk when you pressed it to go down, it will just return the desk to a safe position. In terms of assembly, it has to be one of the easiest desks I've put together. Everything clearly labelled, extremely simple instructions. I did have a helper with me, but she just rolled over and went to sleep. But really, there's nothing you can do wrong. And also, on the controller, it's actually got a USB port on the side as well, which is great if you just want to charge your phone and you don't want to plug it into your PC. You can pre-order the E7 Pro desk now, and they have a super sale on with up to 50% off to enjoy the lowest prices of the year. If you use the code FSKOL, you're going to get 10% off at checkout, and the fastest person to complete a payment using this code each day will win 50% cash back on the order. If you buy any of the standing desks on the website, you'll also enjoy 50% off all the desktops. And ultimately, if you haven't got a standing desk like in this video. Starting with the glove runes, first of all we've got Chaos Bolt, which sends a bolt of chaotic fire at the enemy, dealing X amount of damage, and this is fire damage of course. Chaos Bolt always hits, cannot be resisted, and its knowledge causes all your fire spells to pierce through absorption effects. Now this additional little bit that they've chucked on is quite interesting, because later on in the expansions, actually you could further increase the amount of damage Chaos Bolt does based on your critical strike. They've gone down a different route with it this time, but actually I really like it. So now all of your fire spells are going to pierce through absorption effects, not just Chaos Bolt itself. This doesn't mean that they're always going to hit. An absorption effect, for example, would be a Priest Power Word Shield. If you're pumping Searing Pain, Incinerate, Immolation, whatever into them, just because you've got Chaos Bolt on your gloves, they'll go through those shields. It's fairly needless to say that if you're going to play a fire DPS Warlock, Chaos Bolt is absolutely going to be the one that you go for. Next up we've got Haunt, and just like Chaos Bolt, we're all probably very familiar with Haunt, but it unleashes a ghostly soul on an enemy, dealing damage and increasing all shadow damage over time you deal to that target by 20%. When the Haunt ends or is dispelled, you'll be healed for all the damage it dealt to your target. Now it kind of goes without saying that Haunt is going to be the choice if you're going to be a Shadow DPS Warlock. This will be increasing the amount of damage from things like your Curse of Agony or even your Corruption, and it also means you haven't got to worry as much when you're life tapping to get mana back, because you know Haunt, when it expires, is going to heal you anyway. Overall, Haunt is really good. I'm not sure at lower levels, so in the first bracket, as in phase 1, where we can get to 25, I feel like Fire looks a bit stronger, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Next up, a nice little AoE ability, which is Shadow Bolt Volley. Now this just alters the way your actual Shadow Bolt ability works, where your Shadow Bolt is normally just a single target. Now Shadow Bolt will strike up to 5 targets within a chain distance of 10 yards, but for 20% reduced damage. So on trash in dungeons or even in raids at later levels, if you're not a tank, Shadow Bolt Volley, acting a bit like a chain lightning effect, is going to be super strong. There'll also be certain bosses, even in raids at later levels, where there'll be so many adds that are stacked up that Shadow Bolt Volley could actually be very useful there. But thinking about Phase 1 in particular, having something like this when you're smashing through either BFD or even dungeons trying to get some gear for level 25 is going to be pretty insane. And remember, you only have to be out of combat to change these runes. So Shadow Bolt Volley on trash, or Chaos Bolt on everything else. And then finally the big one, which you're all going to be loving if you're wanting to tank, Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis transfers you into a demon, so it is basically the same looking demon as Metamorphosis in future expansions, but it increases your armor by 500%, reducing the chance you'll be critically hit by 6%, it increases your threat by 50%, increasing mana gained from life tap by 100%, and transforming the functionality of some of your abilities and granting some new abilities. Now, Metamorphosis works exactly the same as a shapeshift would for a druid. So there's no cooldown, there's nothing like that. You can pop freely between Metamorphosis form, so your demon form, and then back to your normal form. So if you was thinking, oh great, you can tank every 30 seconds. No, like this is a permanent effect as long as you've got it toggled on. And then what it actually does for your effects is Searing Pain will become instant cast. Shadow Bolt becomes a Shadow Cleave, which is a shadow melee attack that hits up to 3 nearby enemies and has a 6-second cooldown, and that will synergize really well with another rune, which we'll get to soon. Curse of Recklessness now also taunts your target to attack you for 3 seconds, but gains a 10-second cooldown, and the range is reduced to melee. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like they could have picked a better curse to attach it to. There's nothing wrong with it, it's great, don't get me wrong, but I think they could have put it on like Curse of Weakness, for example, because that would be something that you'd actually want to use as a tank anyway. And on the basis it'll have a 10-second cooldown, you'll not only be using it as a taunt when you need to, but you'll also be applying a damage reduction that the boss or the trash or whatever you actually put it on, you know, that they would actually be dealing to you, rather than actually increasing the amount of damage they're going to do once you've taunted them, but it does reduce their armor. So it's still a DPS game for people, but I don't know, I'd probably put it on Weakness over Recklessness. Tell me in the comments what one you think it belongs on. You're going to get Demon Charge as well, which you charge an enemy and stun it for 1 second. This cannot be used in combat, so this is basically how you're going to start a fight. And then finally you get Demonic Hell, which forces all nearby enemies to focus attacks on you for 6 seconds. Now, what I would say about this is it is a really powerful rune. I mean, that goes without saying. It needs to be a powerful rune to enable a cloth wearer to actually tank, you know, legitimately on all bosses, on all trash, be able to do all the content. But because it's so powerful, it really does mean you can be flexible with your chest and leg runes. So we might as well go with the chest runes next. Now, first up, you've got Demonic Tactics, which, don't get me wrong, it looks a bit boring, but what you do need to think about is the low levels of crit that you're actually going to be having, especially in Phase 1. So what this does is increases the melee and spell critical strike chance of you and your pet by 10%. Now, there'll be more relevance to that rune when we actually get to the legs, so we'll just skip past that one for now, and if you want 10% crit, you can put it on your chest. Next up, we've got an amazing one if you're wanting to do fire DPS, which is called Lake of Fire. Rain of Fire also leaves a lake of fire on the ground that increases all fire damage you deal and your demon pet deals to affected enemies by 40% for 15 seconds. 40% extra fire damage. That's 40% extra damage on Chaos Bolt. And that's not even where it ends, because we can get even more than 40% on other runes. I can see this being used for single target. You'd pop a little Rain of Fire down on the boss, stop channeling to actually start doing a rotation, as in things like Chaos Bolt, Incinerate, Immolate, and then as soon as that 15 seconds runs out, so you've not got the 40% anymore, you just pop another couple of ticks down of Rain of Fire and you crack on. You're going to be heavily reliant on the tank not moving out of it though, because that will be super annoying, and I already see that happening before it's even launched. Next up, we've got Master Channeler. Your drain life is no longer channeled. It lasts 15 seconds with a 15-second cooldown. It costs 100% more mana and heals you for 50% more each time it deals damage. Now, there's a couple of things about this. Straight away, it screams tank, and absolutely, as a tank, you would be using Metamorphosis on your gloves, you'd be using Master Channeler on your chest, and then we'll get to the legs in a minute. This means you use it once and you're constantly healing, and it doesn't matter that it's costing more mana because of how Metamorphosis works, because you're gaining 100% extra mana from life tap. When you life tap, you've got Master Channeler already on the boss, so you instantly start healing for the damage that you've just took by life tapping. So life tap and this obviously synergize together incredibly well if you tank him. But as I say, this is another rune that synergizes incredibly well with a leg rune as well. Next up, quite a boring one because you're probably very familiar with it anyway, and it's Soul Siphon, which increases the amount drained by your drain life and drain soul spells by an additional 6%, for each of your Warlock shadow effects inflicting the target, and this is up to a maximum of 18% additional effect. Now, Soul Siphon sounds very good, and you might want to use it, but me personally, if I was Shadow, I'd be using Master Channeler, and the reason I'd be using Master Channeler is because not only is it another dot, but like I say, it synergizes incredibly well with a leg rune that we're going to talk about now. Everlasting Affliction, where your Drain Life, Drain Soul, Shadow Bolt, Shadow Cleave, Searing Pain, Incinerate, and Haunt refresh the duration of your corruption on the target back to its maximum duration. So if you go Master Channeler on your chest rune, so you've got constant ticks of Drain Life going on, it's going to be constantly refreshing corruption anyway. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're going Shadow DPS, Shadow Bolt and Haunt are going to be refreshing corruption anyway, but like I say, Master Channeler makes it an extra dot. So you're going to have Drain Life constantly ticking, corruption, Curse of Agony, you're going to have Haunt on the target anyway. I mean, it's going to be pretty sick. Now, this in particular is also the rune I wanted to talk about in terms of tanking. Even though for tanking, you're most likely going to take Incinerate, maybe even Demonic Pact, or maybe even Demonic Grace if you need the cooldown, your Shadow Cleave also refreshes corruption to its maximum duration. So as a Warlock tank, if you've got 5 points in improved corruption, which then makes corruption instant cast, and you're tanking trash, you could put corruption on 3 mobs, and you know every time you use Shadow Cleave on cooldown, it's going to refresh that dot on all 3 of them, which I'm not saying that is going to be the go-to way, but I love the way that that actually does synergize really well, even if you're a tank. While we're talking about tanking, we might as well cover Demonic Grace, because this really is the one that's meant to be used for tanks. It causes you to surge with fell energy, increasing your pets and your own dodge chance by 30%, and your chance to critically strike with all attacks by 30%. Now, it only lasts 6 seconds, but it is only on a 20-second cooldown as well. So you can use this when you know there's big predictable swings coming in from a boss. Or where I see it being super useful would be actually on the pull. You know, so as soon as you charge in, bang, use this. You got 30% extra crit for those 6 seconds as well. So you're going to be able to get some big burst threat out on the pull. So it definitely has its place, but if you don't need that dodge chance, I feel like Incinerate for tanking could be really, really good. Because you most likely think that this is actually purely for a fire DPS Warlock, which you're kind of right, but it burns the enemy for X amount of fire damage and increases all fire damage you deal by 25% for the next 15 seconds. Now, if you think about Metamorphosis, Metamorphosis makes Searing Pain instant cast. Searing Pain causes fire damage. You're going to be able to literally spam it as a single target ability, and it causes a high amount of threat. This will be your go-to single target threat builder, and if you now add 25% extra damage onto it, yes, Incinerate, you're going to have to hard cast once every 15 seconds, but I think for actually threat-sensitive fights, or, you know, when you're just trying to put out as much damage as a tank as possible, this could actually be pretty insane. But like I said at the start, this is what makes me excited about Warlock tanks, because actually all 4 of these leg runes are viable, because the one we haven't spoke about is Demonic Pact, and Demonic Pact is, as you would expect from Wrath of the Lich King. Your pet's critical strikes apply the Demonic Pact effect to your party members for 45 seconds, which increases spell damage and healing by 10% of your spell damage, or your level divided by 2, whichever is higher. This doesn't work on subjugated demons, which is absolutely fine. So when you look at these 4, you could run Demonic Grace if you need the extra threat on the pull and you need the 30% dodge chance. You could run Demonic Pact if you wanted to be buffing the group. What you've got to remember, though, is without using some of the other runes to actually get more crit. So this is where the chest rune comes in. With Demonic Tactics, increases the melee and spell critical strike chance of you and your pets by 10%. The uptime on Demonic Pact, it could be a bit of a nightmare for it to actually proc that first time. Of course, it's still going to proc anyway, and there's no actual DPS Warlock spec that's going to want to bring this. They're either going to want to be fire DPS using Incinerate, or they're going to want to be shadow DPS using Everlasting Affliction. Good luck trying to get a non-Warlock tank to bring Demonic Pact, which is why I think actually for a lot of occasions Demonic Pact on the tank is a good idea. But then you do have the option of multi-dotting and keeping them up with Shadow Cleave, and as I said before, Incinerate just for single target threat would be pretty mental as well. I mean, overall you can see how powerful the Warlock's going to be and the options that you've got. If you've seen me get excited over any classes during these Season of Discovery videos, you'll notice I become a lot more animated and get a lot more excited when I'm talking about one where I can't just say you use this rune, that rune, and this rune. You know, because that's boring. When you're like, oh god, you could use this one in that situation, you could use this one in a different situation, that actually makes runes even more fun. But that's the Warlock in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel. Don't leave without liking and subscribing if you're not subscribed already. So cool. Anyway, I'll see you on the next one. Over the years, hunters have had a lot of ups and downs, but generally have remained a pretty good class to play throughout all of the expansions. From being absolutely stacked early on in TBC due to easy access of set bonuses, to even getting some love during Wrath of the Lich King Classic where they was given Trap Launcher early. If you like having a pet, there is just no better class to play. Sure, there's other classes like Warlocks that have got pets, but it's just not the same as a hunter. Season of Discovery brings the rune system where all classes are going to get some pretty funky abilities from future expansions, or in some cases, completely new abilities. As someone who raids quite a lot in Wrath of the Lich King as a hunter, some of the changes that I've seen on Season of Discovery for hunters has actually taken me by surprise. Overall, in Season of Discovery, before we get into the runes though, they look like they're in a really good place. If you're a fan of Beast Mastery, where actually your pet is doing the majority of the damage and you're just looking after him, Beast Mastery gets some pretty insane runes. If you want to go Marksman and you want to ditch your pet to do extra damage, then you've got that option as well. And even though in Survival there are some pretty good talents for actually doing damage at range, Season of Discovery is bringing the melee hunter. So the Survival tree is probably going to be the place to go if you want to be a melee hunter, even though there is actually good reason to go BM, and we'll get into that during the video. Before we get stuck in, click that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. So let's get into the runes and I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown on some little bits that have changed since the demo at BlizzCon. I truly believe that glove runes are going to be one of the first that you get, so let's start there. First of all, you've got Beast Mastery, where your pet's damage and health are increased by 30% and its focus regeneration by 80%. In addition, your pet's growl now also taunts the target to attack it for 3 seconds. Now that is actually a crazy amount of extra damage and health for what are already pretty overpowered pets, particularly at low level. We know in vanilla pets don't scale particularly well, but actually when you're leveling, hunter pets that are just fine. And if you put that 30% extra damage on top of picking up Unleash Fury in the talents, where you're going to get a further 20% damage, and there's also another rune that we're going to talk about soon that further increases your pet damage, I think hunter pets are going to be absolutely slapping. But if you don't really care too much about your pet doing the damage, then you've got Carve. Now, Carve is a sweeping attack that strikes all enemies in front of you for 50% weapon damage. So this is the first of the melee hunter abilities. It's nice that it's a full-on cleave in front of you, so a nice AoE ability. And I think it's probably a good time to mention a couple of little things that were picked up during the data mining earlier on this month that go against what we saw at the demo at BlizzCon. So basically, every hunter that I saw play at BlizzCon all for some reason instantly went for the melee hunter option. And it's because it's new, I totally get it. But I think Blizzard very quickly saw how weak it was even during those short demos. Because what they've actually gone ahead and done, assuming this all makes it into live, is the Raptor Strike cooldown has been cut in half. So ordinarily it's 6 seconds, but now it's going to be 3 seconds. And that's going to be an important ability when we get to a rune very, very soon. And also, traps can now be used in combat. And not only that, the tooltip actually shows a 40-yard range. This was not the case at BlizzCon. Traps could not be used in combat. But now as a melee hunter, up close and personal with the boss or with the trash, being able to carve, drop an explosive trap, and then obviously there's some other abilities that are going to come from runes which we haven't actually looked at yet. It could actually be pretty crazy, and you can see the comparison in tooltips for both Raptor Strike and Explosive Shot here. Now, Explosive Shot and Immolation Trap very well could be acting like their very own trap launcher for hunters that want to play at ranged, or they could have a 40-yard range because actually there will be a rune that comes in later, maybe on shoulders or on your cloak or something like that, that actually gives you trap launcher. So I wouldn't get too excited in a moment, even though it's got that range on it. I still think that might be paired with another rune to enable it to be trap launched. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see about that, but I do truly think that the actual change to the combat traps is around the melee hunter not doing enough damage. And then for you general DPS that want to be doing all the pumping themselves at range, we've got Chimera Shot, where you do 125% weapon damage, refreshing the current sting on your target and trigger an effect. If it's Serpent Sting, it instantly deals 40% of the damage done by your Serpent Sting. If it's Viper Sting, you're instantly going to restore mana equal to 60% of the total amount drained by your Viper Sting. If it's Scorpid Sting, you're going to be able to do a 10-second disarm, and this can't occur more than once a minute. So you've got some options there. Obviously, it's a great way to be able to get some mana back. It's a great way just to do extra damage because you're going to have Serpent Sting on the boss or on the trash most of the time, especially when paired with another rune that we're going to talk about soon. This is what I actually do like about the Hunter. There's some runes that I don't like, and I wouldn't have gone down the melee route if I'm completely honest, but a lot of these runes do synergize really well. And in PvP, having the disarming Chimera Shot is absolutely amazing. And finally, if you play Wrath of the Lich King as a hunter, you know Explosive Shot has been the bread and butter of the survival hunter pretty much for the entire expansion. You fire an explosive charge into the enemy target, dealing X amount of damage, and it's fire damage by the way, and the charge will blast the target every second for an additional 2 seconds. Now the cooldown's shared with Arcane Shot, which fine. This is missing one key thing. The thing that makes Explosive Shot extremely fun to use is lock and load. So I'm really hoping that one of the future runes, maybe when we get to level 40 or even level 50, is actually going to be lock and load. And the lock and load rune could interact with all of these, not just Explosive Shot. I think Explosive Shot feels great with lock and load. Until we've got that, don't know. That's the glove runes anyway, and overall there is a little something for everyone. But let's move on to the chest runes. Now, if you don't know, there was so much noise being made about the fact that Alliance are going to have Wind Fury from Cats, they're going to have Blessing of Kings from Paladins, and Blizzard are listening, and they're already making changes before the game is even going out, which is amazing to see. Raptor Strike having its cooldown reduced, traps being used at range potentially and being able to be used in combat, and then Aspect of the Lion being added. There is one thing that I don't like, and I'm not 100% sure on myself yet, but it looks like Exposed Weakness, which was this rune, has actually been removed and replaced with Aspect of the Lion. Now, I'm sure there's a good reason for this, mainly because the amount of agility that you're going to have early on probably ain't going to make Exposed Weakness too powerful to be worth using, and it might be brought in as a rune at a later level bracket. Aspect of the Lion is Blizzard's way of giving the Horde Blessing of Kings. So the Hunter takes on the Aspect of the Lion, increasing total stats by 10% for all nearby allies, and increasing total stats for the Hunter by an additional 10%. Of course, only one aspect can be used at a time, and you'd be using this in place of Aspects of the Hawk. But you're literally just going to be giving Blessing of Kings to everybody around you without ever even needing to buff. And on top of that, you're going to get that extra 10% stats yourself as well. Overall, really good. I would have liked to have seen it not being an aspect. Maybe not even seen it on a hunter. It could have come from anywhere. I feel like me personally as a hunter, I'd rather be using Aspect of the Hawk, because you get things like improved Aspect of the Hawk, where you have a chance at increasing your ranged attack speed. So no actual ranged hunter is ever going to want to use this. So really, you are only limiting yourself to melee hunters bringing this, because actually the other abilities here for melee hunters, not particularly good, not really worth using. So you will just use Aspect of the Lion. We either have a melee hunter or we don't have kings, because no ranged hunter is going to want to use this. Just a minor complaint. Next up would be Cobra Strikes though, where your critical hits with shot abilities cause your pets next to special attacks to critically hit. This has got some amazing synergy, so I don't want to talk about this too much, but BM hunters, you're going to want this. And it will become clearer when we get onto the leg runes, but this will be your go-to chest rune if you're going to play a BM hunter. Lone Wolf is absolutely amazing, and I've got to be honest, this is the one rune that makes me want to play hunter in Season of Discovery. I'm not a big fan of pets. I know some of you probably love having a pet as a hunter, but the first time I really enjoyed hunter was as soon as I could get rid of the pet back in original retail, and when Lone Wolf was first introduced. I love the fact that you can ditch your pet and do 25% increased damage with all attacks while that pet is not active. But this doesn't mean that you can't use a pet still. You've got to remember, you can change these runes on the fly, boss by boss basis. As long as you're out of combat, you'll change runes. So let's think about the next one being Master Marksman, where it increases your critical strike chance by 5% and reduces the mana cost of all your shot abilities by 25%. As a ranged hunter, you could switch between these two on a fight-by-fight basis. If it's a fight where your pet is constantly getting AoE'd and hit by stuff, get rid of the pet and just nuke the boss. If it's one where it's quite pet-friendly and there's not that much AoE going around, you could take Master Marksman for better mana, to obviously keep pumping more. You could even take Cobra Strikes, which obviously will just get your pet doing even more damage. I still think, really, for a ranged hunter, you're between Lone Wolf and Master Marksman, and you would switch it up on a fight-by-fight basis. But they're the chest runes, and overall, I don't see a lot of options. As I say, Cobra Strikes really is for BM, Lone Wolf, Master Marksman for if you want to be a ranged hunter, and Aspect of the Lion, unfortunately, if you're a melee hunter, this is what you're going to have to use. But luckily, you haven't really got many other options anyway. And then finally, onto the legs. Now, the legs have some amazing abilities. Flanking Strike is for your melee hunters, where you and your pet deal simultaneous, instant 100% melee damage. Afterwards, your Mongoose Bite and Raptor Strike deal 10% increased damage for 10 seconds, and this stacks 3 times. Raptor Strike has a 20% chance to reset the cooldown on Flanking Strike. Now, this is important because if we go back to where I was talking about Raptor Strike having its cooldown cut in half, this is the reason why. Because the more times you can press Raptor Strike, the more chances you're going to have to be able to press Flanking Strike more. And this is also why I said going down in BM as a melee hunter could be quite beneficial, because you're going to get Unleashed Fury, which is going to make your pet do more damage when you're using Flanking Strike. And I do honestly believe as a melee hunter that your pet is going to be doing a sizable amount of your damage overall. But looking at if we was to go for a melee hunter build, you're going to have Aspect of the Lion, Carve, and Flanking Strike. Carve is going to be your filler that you use when you can't Raptor Strike because it's on cooldown. Flanking Strike would be your number one prio. As soon as it is ready, you press it straight away, and you're just hoping every time you press Raptor Strike, it's going to reset. Now, you're probably wondering why I didn't mention Mongoose Bite in there and I'm fixating on Raptor Strike. But that's because Mongoose Bite is a counter-attack, so you have to physically dodge an attack before this becomes active. I would like to see a rune further down the line where, I don't know, this has a chance on Carve, or it has a chance on Flanking Strike to allow it to be used no matter what. Because it is going to be a melee ability that you got sat there, and the vast majority of the time in PvE when you're in a dungeon or a raid, you're not going to be able to use it. So I do think there needs to be a bit of thought put in there to allow Mongoose Bite to be used sort of rotationally or as a proc. A little bit like for Warriors in Cataclysm where Overpower can be used. But overall, Flanking Strike's going to be great for you melee hunters. I hope you enjoy it. Kill Command is next, and this is nothing new. We've used Kill Command, and it's normally something you macro into your other abilities and just forget about it. Firstly, what it does and why I think this synergizes really well in the level 25 bracket. It gives the command to kill, increasing your pet's damage done from special attacks by 60% for 30 seconds. Each special attack done by the pet reduces the damage bonus by 20%. Now again, if we think about the extra 20% damage from Unleashed Fury and Beast Mastery, and we go back to the chest room for Cobra Strikes, where when you critically hit, it causes your pet's next two special attacks to critically hit, you would want to Kill Command after you've got a proc from your Cobra Strike, so you know the next two special attacks are going to crit on your pet. Those two crits are going to do additional damage on top of the 30% extra damage that your pet's getting from Beast Mastery as well. Means your pet's special abilities are about to absolutely truck someone. So I feel like these Beast Mastery related runes and talents all synergize together really, really well. We've just got two left now. We've got Serpent Spread, which again is a great talent that's been brought forward from Cataclysm, where basically all enemies hit by your multi-shot are also going to get 6 seconds worth of your Serpent Sting. So as a hunter, now imagine that you are getting Trap Launcher and your explosive trap actually has got a 40-yard range like the tooltip shows, and you're using multi-shot to put Serpent Sting on everything, you're going to be pumping. There's not really a lot else to say about this. It is just really nice. And again, it could synergize particularly well with Chimera Shot, because when you do Chimera Shot, it's going to refresh the current sting on your target, which even though it's only a 6-second Serpent Sting you're getting from Serpent Spread, if you Chimera Shot into one of these targets, it will go to a max duration Serpent Sting. So that's pretty good. And finally, Sniper Training. Now, this one just seemed bonkers to me, and let me know in the comments if you think it's as overpowered as I think it is. Your shot abilities gain 30% increased critical strike chance.
That shit's going to get toned down really quick.
6 seconds. 30%. That is so much crit. And
I remember that came out in like Warlord's Trainer for Marksman Mastery. Sniper Training.
So much
the more mastery you got, the more you would gain from Sniper Training.
Like, that is a bonkers amount of crit.
And it increased your range as well.
Playing at range that isn't using Flanking Strike because they're melee is going to take Sniper Training for every single target boss, without a doubt. Of course, for big cleave fights, you might be using Serpent Spread, but I think even for that, I'd be more tempted to take Sniper Training and use my Explosive Trap as a way of doing some cleave to other mobs, so I can just fully focus whatever the main kill target is, blasting it down with 30% extra crit chance. See, I think the Hunter is in a really good place, because even if you don't play a Hunter main, you can very quickly look at these and know exactly when you're going to use each one. And the fact that if you want to be a melee Hunter, you have 0 choice between runes, or maybe 1. You might have 1 choice of a rune, because technically with a 3-second Raptor Strike now, you could drop Carve and take Beast Mastery, so your pet's actually going to start doing a lot more damage. But that's 1 less melee ability you can press, so I don't know. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, be sure to like and subscribe, and check Rested XP out. I'm putting them at the end of all these videos because it's free. I just want to put that out there. Yes, if you want to buy the level 20 to 60 portion of the guide, you need to get the Classic Era Speed Leveling Guide, which it will be the fastest way you can level. Obviously, up till 25, the 1 to 20 on Rested XP is free anyway, so you might as well download it and use it. You're welcome. I'll see you on the next one. Ah, the priest, the staple healer on any vanilla server that everyone laughs at if they're not a dwarf. And why is that? Fear Ward. While in later expansions every priest has Fear Ward and it's used regularly, in vanilla it's only dwarves that get it. Season of Discovery looks likely to change that though, as in a recent interview with the devs they said there will be discoveries in the form of shrines and religions which could allow priests to swap their racial ability. Now this would be a game changer, because if you can be something like a human priest where you benefit from the extra spirit but also pick up Fear Ward at later levels, you're going to be laughing. The priest in Season of Discovery doesn't get any wild changes like rogues, warlocks and shamans being given the ability to tank, but every rune is impactful, building on an already big toolkit of healing spells if you plan on healing, or making Shadow look extremely advertising if you want a DPS. I do have one concern about Priest though, and it is a big one, but that will be made clearer as we work through the runes aimed towards Shadow Priests in particular. So grab a drink, click that subscribe button, or you might as well like the video while you're down there, because if you like Priests and you like Season of Discovery, you're probably going to like this. And let's have a look at the runes that the Priest is going to get in Season of Discovery. Very briefly, what are runes? Runes are going to be discovered from exploring, doing new quest chains, finding them hidden perhaps in dungeons or raids, as well as other sources, which I'm sure we just have no idea about yet. Runes will be coming to more slots than just hands, legs and chests in future phases, but in phase 1, that is what we're working with. On each of the 3 pieces of armor being chest, hands and legs, you're going to have 4 different runes to choose from. Starting with the gloves, because I do believe that this is probably going to be one of the first ones you pick up. Circle of Healing is going to be the first option, and to be fair, we're probably all familiar with that spell. It's an AoE heal where it heals all of the target player's party members within 15 yards of the target player for X amount of healing. It's incredibly strong, but it's also going to be incredibly expensive because it does cost 21% of your base mana. And this is something that I spoke about in another video. Well, it was actually in a podcast, and I took a little clip out of the podcast and posted it a couple of days ago. But all of these runes, because it don't look like you actually go to the trainer to learn new ranks, they are going to be base mana cost. So some of them you're going to have to use quite carefully, because you can't down rank. There'll be no ability to down rank. You'll always be using the max rank, which obviously is going to be expensive when it's using 20% of your base mana, and you're not going to have that much intellect raising that base mana, especially when you're only level 25. But still, for you healers, Circle of Healing is going to be absolutely amazing, and it's going to be fun to use in both dungeons and raids. Next up, for Shadow Priest, or just anyone wanting to do some damage really, we've got Mind Sear, which causes an explosion of shadow magic around the enemy target. It does shadow damage every 1 second for 5 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards around the target. Now, the only one thing that I think is a bit of a shame here is that we got the poor man's version of Mind Sear. So we've got the version that you'd have in Wrath of the Lich King, where it has to be targeted on an enemy. So that enemy that you're targeting will take no damage from Mind Sear, just all the enemies around it. What would have been nice to see is the Cataclysm version, where actually you can cast it on a friendly target. So if a tank runs in, you could cast it on the tank, and it's going to hit every mob equally. Not a big deal, just a minor little complaint. If your favourite spec is a Shadow Priest and you want to play Season of Discovery, you're going to have an AoE now, which still is absolutely amazing. Next up, again, not an unfamiliar spell, but Penance. Launches a volley of holy light at a target, causing holy damage to an enemy or healing to an ally instantly and every 1 second for 2 seconds. It is actually one of my favourite looking spells that a priest has ever had. It does look like it's going to be on a 12-second cooldown, and it's got a 16% base mana cost. So again, while in Wrath you want to just use this literally on cooldown, you've also got a lot of intellect to go along with it to enable you to use it on cooldown. I think you're going to have to use this quite intelligently. And the final option is Shadow Word Death, and this is the point where I'm going to talk about my concern. So firstly, Shadow Word Death is a word of dark binding that inflicts shadow damage to the target. If a target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, the caster takes damage equal to the damage inflicted upon the target. So I'm guessing if you've played any version of World of Warcraft that isn't vanilla and you've played a Shadow Priest, you'll be familiar with what Shadow Word Death is. But just onto my concern while we're on this ability. As we work through all of these runes, be it gloves, legs or chest, none of them seem to have anything that's going to aid a Shadow Priest's mana regen. Now, we know there's things like Seal of the Martyrdom, which a Paladin may be using, which does grant mana to the party, but the Shadow Priest hasn't got anything to actually be sort of self-sufficient. The reason I wanted to talk about
Snuts is in this guild.
Is what they could have done is actually
the Majora tournament winner.
Called Masochism. Now, what Masochism
unless it's just like a fanboy, I'd have to like see if he's live. And that's like him. There's like 71 warrior called Snutsy.
That is just a thought. They're probably not going to change it because we're so close to release now. I think Agrand or Blizz in general, if you're watching, I think priests might need a little bit of help on the old mana side. But moving on to the chest. First up, we've got Serendipity, where healing with Flash Heal reduces the cast time of your next Lesser Heal, Heal, Greater Heal, or Prayer of Healing by 20% for 20 seconds. And this stacks 3 times. Now, it's interesting because what's been changed with Serendipity here in comparison to later expansions is they've also added Lesser Heal and Heal into the mix. Ordinarily, it's just Greater Heal and Prayer of Healing. Now, on the basis that it looks like it's only rune abilities that are going to have a base mana cost where you need to be careful when you're using them, the existing spells as of this moment in time when you're looking on Wowhead all have an actual mana cost, meaning you can downrank. Don't get me wrong, they could go along the lines of making everything a base mana cost by the time...
Never mind, that's not him.
As it looks at the moment, you could downrank Flash Heal as an example. So you could pump out really quick, fast rank 1 Flash Heals for minimal mana, but then directly afterwards pump out a really fast Prayer of Healing. Or if the tank was in trouble, obviously it would be a Greater Heal. But you could try and be really mana efficient by using low rank Flash Heals to then give you a quicker, higher ranked heal or higher ranked lesser heal, whatever way round, just to keep a constant stream of healing on the tank. Next up, we've got Strength of Soul. Now, Strength of Soul was actually a talent that was added in Cataclysm, where your lesser heal, heal, greater heal, and flash heal reduce the remaining duration of the weakened soul effect on the target that you've healed. So as an example, the point of this would be to put a shield on the tank. You would then spam some heals or lesser heals into it to get rid of that weakened soul effect, and as soon as the shield drops, boom, you're renewing it with another one. There's not really much to say there. I don't see this being that powerful. I mean, I probably, if I was healing, I would prefer Serendipity, but it's nice that it's there as an option. Next up, you've got Twisted Faith. Now, Twisted Faith is just basically the same as the Wrath of the Lich King talent, but minus the extra spell damage from Spirit. In Wrath of the Lich King, it does give spell damage based on Spirit, but here it is just a flat 20% extra damage with your Mind Flay and Mind Blast to targets affected by your Shadow Word Pain. Now, on the basis, Mind Flay and Mind Blast are going to be your 2 most damaging spells, giving them both 20% extra damage. It's kind of a no-brainer, even when we look at the very last rune, which we haven't covered yet, but I think Twisted Faith is going to be almost just a must-have as a Shadow Priest, as long as you're not Ohm. But the last one is Void Plague, which afflicts the target with a disease that causes X amount of shadow damage over 18 seconds. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this is basically just Devouring Plague. Well, yes and no. Devouring Plague obviously does exist in the game, even though it's only for undead priests. Like I said earlier, later on in the phase, or even in a future phase, you might be able to get Devouring Plague no matter what race priest you are. And even though Devouring Plague's on a 3-minute cooldown, how amazing would it be having Shadow Word Pain up, Devouring Plague, and Void Plague? That's just going to be a nasty amount of dot damage, which you can then just top off with some Mind Blast and Mind Flays, and things are probably just going to die. I think overall, the choice of chest runes is pretty basic depending on what spec you're playing. Strength of Soul, I'm sure, will have a place, but I think most healers would just naturally run Serendipity. And I think fight-dependent, Twisted Faith and Void Plague can be mixed in and out. And the reason I say fight-dependent is Void Plague could be used on heavy movement fights, whereas Twisted Faith would be used on fights where you don't need to move as much. Because remember, if you're putting Void Plague up and then you've got to move, you're getting the full benefit of that rune. If you're having to move when you're using Twisted Faith, well, you're just losing damage. And then finally, bringing us to the leg runes. I'm going to leave Homunculi till last just because that is really interesting. So let's start with Shared Pain. So Shared Pain basically allows your Shadow Word Pain to afflict up to 2 additional nearby targets within 15 yards. Pretty basic. You put Shadow Word Pain on a target, and if there is any other targets nearby, they're also going to get Shadow Word Pain on them, up to a maximum of 2 extra targets. Now, this is great, but it depends on how hard some of this stuff's going to be. So this could be an absolute nightmare if it hits CC targets. So if a mage has got to target Polymorph because it heals and you don't want to deal with it until later on in the fight, and you've got a Shadow Priest using their Shadow Word Pain and then it's putting it on the sheep, that'd be a nightmare. As long as these things can't hit targets that are in CC, then there's no issue. And looking at the way all these classes look like they're going to play, everyone's getting AoE, everyone's getting cleave. It's probably not going to be that much CC going on anyway. But on a 3-target cleave boss, Shared Pain is going to be absolutely amazing, as is it going to be amazing in dungeons. Next up, we've got Prayer Amending, another old familiar spell, where it places a spell on the target that heals them for X amount of healing the next time they take damage or receive healing. When the heal occurs, Prayer Amending jumps to a party or raid member within 20 yards. And this jumps up to 5 times and lasts 30 seconds after each jump. This spell can only be placed on 1 target at a time. If you're a real die-hard priest, did you notice the one thing that makes this absolutely amazing. Assuming it goes live like this, it has been changed to be the next time they take damage or receive healing. So currently, a really irritating thing about prayer mending is when it jumps to someone and they take no damage. So you have no control over being able to force that prayer mending off of them. You need to just put a new prayer mending out. Now, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this spell costs 15% base mana, so you want to make sure this does jump 5 times. So the fact that if it jumps to a range, let's say it jumps to your mage and your mage is taking no damage, you can quickly throw a lesser heal or a really cheap heal onto them to force that prayer of mending to jump again. Now that's huge, and I truly believe that that is probably Blizzard really looking ahead and thinking some of these healing spells are really good, but you're not going to be able to use them on cooldown like you would use them on cooldown in Wrath of the Lich King or in Cataclysm or in whatever. And I reckon they've added that little receive healing in there just to compensate for that. And just in case you're interested, I even checked the retail version of prayer mending to see if it does the same thing, and it doesn't. In fact, I checked through every patch change that Prayer of Mending has ever seen and can't see anything where this has actually been a change in the past. So this is completely unique to Season of Discovery, assuming it goes live how it reads. Next up, a big complaint from me. Me complain? I know, never. Power Barrier. This is an absolutely amazing ability. It summons a holy barrier to protect all party members at the target location for 10 seconds. Which reduces all damage taken by 25% and preventing damage from delaying spellcasting. Now, not only does this ability look amazing, it is an incredibly powerful raid cooldown, and it's one that you want to feel powerful using. Now, my complaint with it is how it reads. It reads as protecting party members at the location. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that probably means raid as well. Going back to Prayer of Mending, that actually reads as party or raid members, and there's loads of other abilities that read as party or raid. This sounds like it's party only. Now, my complaint about it is this should be raid wide, because there's a big bubble that everybody can stand in and they know they're going to take reduced damage. This could get really confusing if a priest puts it down and you think, you know, you're going to go and stand in it and you're going to take reduced damage, but it's actually only 5 people, you know, a single party out of, let's say, 10 of you if you're doing BFD, that are going to actually benefit from it. So this could force people to stack that don't really need to be stacked. They're wasting time running over to the barrier when they're not actually in the same party as the priest. So unless this is trying to encourage having multiple priests, in which case it's such a powerful raid cooldown that you'd almost want one priest in each group, or one priest in most groups, to be able to power barrier their entire group. I don't know. I just feel like it should be raid wide. Let me know what you think in the comments, because I think that's going to be a really clunky one to have as party only when it's visible to everyone. And then finally, the one that I wanted to finish on, because it's a brand new ability. While we've seen ones like it, kind of, we've not seen them work quite in this way. What this ability does is it breaks off splinters of your soul to animate 3 miniature copies of yourself that attempt to attack your current target with a mace, sword, and axe, reducing the attack speed, attack power, and armor, respectively, of any target they hit. I'm really intrigued to see how this works, because reducing attack speed would be Thunderclap, reducing attack power would be, let's say, Demo Roar, and armor would, of course, be Sunder Armor. Now, this is quite a long cooldown, because it's on a 2-minute cooldown. So every 2 minutes, you're going to be able to use this. But if you've already got a warrior in the group keeping up his Sunders, keeping up his Thunderclap, and his Demo Shout, then you're only really benefiting from the damage that the 3 little splinters are doing, which we don't know what the damage is going to look like yet. So what I'm actually hoping is this is a raid-wide damage increase. I know it's only really going to affect the melee, because it's going to further reduce the armor of the bosses, but it's also going to be used as a defensive cooldown, because your tanks are not going to be getting slapped as hard or as fast, but it would rely on its stacking with existing debuffs. So I'm hoping that thought has been taken by Blizzard, and it's basically a weaker version of Demo Shout, Thunderclap, and Sunder Armor, so it's not going to be as powerful as the ones that the Warrior does, but it will stack with them. Now, outside of my concerns about mana for Shadow Priests, I think they're looking in a really good place, and there's been sensible changes to these new abilities that have been added, such as the Prayer of Mending change. I think is going to get Priest off to a really good start. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm covering all the classes. If you haven't seen the other ones, obviously there's... just go and find them on the channel. They've all been posted in the last few days. And I'm going to actually combine all of these at the end. So once I've finished all 9 classes, I'm going to put all 9 into one video, but with some minor revisions of... It is so good to see mages get a lot of love in Season of Discovery, because since 2019, they've just been terrible. From really, really slow levelers in vanilla, having a nightmare during TBC when it comes to making gold because of how squishy they are, and then just barely doing any damage in Wrath of the Lich King, so just struggling to get raid spots overall. So it's really nice to see that they can broaden their horizons a little bit in Season of Discovery, because not only are they going to be able to absolutely pump on damage meters, they're also going to be able to heal as well. All sarcasm aside, I do genuinely think that in the right hands, a healing mage, or a regen mage as I'm referring to it, is going to be absolutely nuts. If you're not aware already and you haven't seen any Season of Discovery content so far, I mean, what have you been doing? You're going to get a bunch of new abilities during Season of Discovery, and they come from runes. Up until the point of level 25, which is the cap in phase 1, you're going to have a total of 12 runes that you can collect. There'll be a choice of 4 on your chest, 4 on your legs, and 4 on your gloves. Talent wise, it gets a little bit tricky because you've only got access to 16 points in total, but depending on what runes you use is going to heavily dictate the type of talent build that you actually create. So let's get into what new abilities you're going to get from these runes. Starting with the glove runes, because it's looking like these are going to be the first ones you're going to get access to. You've got an old familiar arcane spell called Arcane Blast, where you blast the target with energy, dealing 190 to 221 arcane damage. Each time you cast Arcane Blast, the damage and healing of all other arcane spells is increased by 15%, and the mana cost of Arcane Blast is also increased by 175%. This effect stacks up to 4 times and lasts 6 seconds, or until any other arcane damage or healing spell is cast. So the traditional way to play Arcane when you've got Arcane Blast is to have a burst phase and to have a regen phase. Your burst phase will be just going ham with all your cooldowns and just pressing Arcane Blast as much as your mana pool will allow, because you know you're going to have either Kate or your mana gem or mana potion or whatever to fall back on to get your mana back up. At which point you're then doing sort of a regen phase where you're going Arcane Blast, maybe then missiles. Your mana pool is going to dictate how many Arcane Blasts you can get out without your mana going too low. And then you're waiting for your burst phase again. Now, the interesting thing is how this is going to synergize with the healing runes, though, which we're going to get onto very soon. Another old familiar spell for Frost Mages is Ice Lance, where it deals a small amount of damage, only being 23 to 27 frost damage, but it causes triple damage against frozen targets. Not really a lot to say there. It's going to be a frost or a PvP talent, but it is very good, and it does start to hit very hard, obviously, as you start to get plus frost damage or plus spell damage. Living Bomb for the Fire Mages, where the target becomes a living bomb, taking 142 fire damage over 12 seconds, and at the end of that 12 seconds, or if the spell is dispelled, the target explodes, dealing 72 fire damage to all enemies nearby. Again, it's a staple move for Fire Mages, but more so when you're sort of using it to actually get an extra chance at a crit to get instant Pyroblast procs. That could come in the future in a different rune, possibly. But either way, it's a great addition to the Fire Mage toolkit. Now, Rewind Time is the final one, and this is for you healing mages. This ain't going to make a great deal of sense until we get into the other runes, so I'd rather just come back to this one. So let's go straight onto the chest. First of all, you've got Burnout, which increases your spell crit chance with all spells by 15%, but your non-periodic spell critical strikes now have an additional mana cost of 1% of your base mana. Quite honestly, 15% crit for an extra 1% base mana on each spell, it's not that bad. In fact, it's a bloody good trade-off. Next up, you've got Enlightenment, where you deal 10% more damage while you have more than 70% mana, but while below 30% mana, 10% of your mana regen continues while casting. And this actually sort of plays into the whole burst phase and regen phase when you're arcane, because when you're above 70% mana, you'll be absolutely pumping, you're getting that extra damage, but then when you drop below 30% and you start doing your preservation phase, we'll call it, where you're just trying to get your mana back up and you're taking it quite easy, then you're going to get that extra regen kick in, so would be really good for Arcane. Fingers of Frost is a great one, which many Frost Mages from future expansions will know about. It gives your chill effects a 15% chance to grant you the Fingers of Frost effect, which treats your next 2 spells as if the targets were frozen, and this lasts 15 seconds. Now, just looking at things like Shatter in the Frost Tree, you're going to get extra crit chance if something's frozen. So if your Fingers of the Frost is treating them like they're frozen, you're obviously going to get the benefits from talents like this. And of course, it will synergize really well with Ice Lance, because Ice Lance does triple damage if they're a frozen target. The big shame, though, is early on, you're only going to be able to get far enough down to put 1 point into Shatter. So whether the rune's worth it or not, I guess we'll find out. And now, finally, before we go back onto the glove rune, because now it will start to make more sense. This is your main healing mage ability. It's called Regeneration, hence why I called it the Regen Mage. So what it does is heals the target for 485 health over 3 seconds and applies Temporal Beacon for 30 seconds. So the secondary ability to this is it records the subject's space-time position, 100% of all arcane damage done by the caster will be converted to chromantic healing and divided among the target's current temporal beacon targets. So for any retail enjoyers or just future expansion enjoyers, it is very, very, very similar, almost exactly the same as Atonement for Priests. So you're going to be wanting to get temporal beacon on people, then you're going to be bursting with arcane damage to heal them. But you can also do direct heals in the form of a 3-second channel using regeneration. But ultimately what you're wanting to do is control the fight and know who's going to be taking damage. So if it's a heavy tank fight, you're not going to want temporal beacon on loads of people. You're just going to want it on the tank. If it's a 2-tank fight and they're both taking sort of reliable, steady damage, you'll want beacon on both of them, so you're dividing the healing between the two. I actually think it's going to be quite a skillful healer to play, because you really need to understand what's going on in the fight and when you want maximum temporal beacons on as many people as possible, or you just want it on 1 or 2 people, or maybe even just 1. So I'm really happy with the way that the healing mage looks like it's going to play out. So what's interesting is when we go back to the glove runes. Now you've got rewind time, and this has got a minute cooldown. Your current target with your temporal beacon instantly heals all damage taken over the last 5 seconds. It is ineffective on targets that didn't have a temporal beacon 5 seconds ago. So this would be great for tanks, but it is a 1-minute cooldown. So once a minute, you're going to be able to literally more or less heal someone from who was just about to die to completely full health, which is really good, but it is only one target. My issue with this is I would say Arcane Blast is going to be the way to go, because we know how regeneration works where it is based on arcane damage. The rewind time's great as a big cooldown to top someone off extremely fast, but then you are relying on things like arcane missiles and maybe arcane explosion, but we're going to say pretty much arcane missiles. So I almost feel like in the early game, especially in phase 1 up to 25, Arcane Blast is going to be an absolute must. But still, rewind time, really cool ability, and I do look forward to playing around with it. Now for the leg runes, we've got Arcane Surge, which is a 2-minute cooldown, and it unleashes all of your remaining mana in a surge of energy focused at the target. And this deals an absolute truck ton of damage. It is all arcane damage, so it will synergize well with your regeneration, and it's increased by up to 300% based on your mana remaining. And then afterwards, your normal mana regeneration is activated and increased by 300% for 8 seconds. So you're going to have this massive big nuke on the target and use, well, as much of your mana as you've got left, and then you'll get a big amount of regen for the next 8 seconds. It is a 2-minute cooldown, which is quite interesting. This could be used by both DPS and healers, but only healers if you don't need mass regen, which we're going to get to in just a second. In fact, we might as well cover it now. So your other healing ability you can get from runes is exactly the same as regen, but now it's mass regen. So it heals all of the target player's party members within 15 yards of the target for 262 over 3 seconds, and applies temporal beacon to each target for 15 seconds. The secondary part of this ability is exactly the same as regeneration. So now any arcane damage you do is it's gonna split that damage evenly amongst those 5 people as healing. Now the thing is, you're not always gonna need mass regeneration. There'll be fights where mass regeneration will be absolutely amazing. And then there's gonna be other cases where actually you only need it on a couple of people. You know, let's say you're doing a 5-man like Dead Mines or something like that. You're not going to need regeneration on the entire party because they're not all going to be taking damage. Most of the time, you'll be keeping it on the tank. Maybe someone else starts taking a bit of damage. So then you do the regeneration channel on that person. Now you've got a tank and one other person with temporal beacon on, and you're just going to nuke the boss or nuke the ad, whatever you're doing. Mass regeneration will be a lot more useful in raids, no doubt. But even then, it's going to be raid bosses where specifically lots of people are taking damage. Arcane Surge would probably be a risky one to replace it as a healer, because you are then going to have a small period where you're completely even though you're going to then get 8 seconds afterwards of really, really good regen. We'll have to see how that plays out, because at the moment I'm not sure I would ever want to get rid of all of my mana in one go and then someone needs a quick heal and I'm having to wait for regen. I don't know how that will quite work out. Next up, we've got Icy Veins, which again, we're probably very familiar with. It hastens your spellcasting, increasing spellcasting speed by 20%, and reduces the pushback suffered from damage and attacks while casting by 100%. It lasts 20 seconds, and it's on a 3-minute cooldown. Again, pretty much any spec, whether you're Frost, Fire, or Arcane, can make use of this, definitely. And it would be a nice throughput cooldown to use if you didn't need mass regeneration and you was healing. Obviously, it's a great cooldown to use if you're Frost and you're pumping out those Frost bolts, or you're Fire, pumping out those Fire bolts. It's just a 3-minute cooldown. Not really a lot else to say. And then finally, we've got Living Flame, which summons a Spellfire flame that moves toward the target, leaving a trail of Spellfire This trail deals 42 spellfire damage every second to nearby enemies, and it lasts 20 seconds. Now, this has a 1-minute cooldown, and the best thing I could really compare it to is Flame Orb that mages will get in Cataclysm, where it just fires an orb that slowly moves towards the target, does damage to everyone on the way. It's, you know, it seems like that's sort of the route they've gone down, but this is just a little bit better because the fire stays on the floor, and hopefully tanks respect that and stand things in the fire so you get more damage. It's going to be absolutely useless if you want to heal, really, because it does spellfire damage, not arcane, so it's not going to actually contribute to your temporal beacons. But as a fire mage, really your options are fairly limited because you're either going for Icy Veins for a nice cooldown, or you're going for Living Flame, where yes, it's on a cooldown, but it's still a lot shorter of a cooldown and actually does damage. Overall, Mage has just got some amazing abilities, and as you know, I'm breaking all of these classes down for members only, so if you've joined the channel, thanks very much. If you're not sure how to support the channel, but you want something for yourself, then check out the Classic Era Rested XP speed leveling guides, because we're all probably going to be using them. Well, I mean, I'll be using them anyway, and obviously it's an affiliate link, so if you buy it, I get a bit of kickback as well. And trust me, if you haven't used it before, it really is the quickest way to level. Like and subscribe. See you on the next one. Shaman in Season of Discovery is one that I'm really excited to talk about. In fact, it's one that I really didn't expect to be quite as excited about. With Shamans already having the ability to DPS and heal, the thought of them ever getting an actual tanking spec was something I didn't think would ever happen. With Season of Discovery and the addition of new runes, which at level 25 being phase 1, you're going to be able to use hands, chest and leg runes, it brings a lot of variety to the Shaman, and quite honestly, changes it completely, but in a good way. Now, I've never been somebody who's like, oh, I really need a Shaman. It's probably the one I've leveled or geared up or DPS'd on or healed on the least out of all of the classes. So why am I excited? Well, to understand that, you just need to look at some of these runes, because they are absolutely bonkers. At level 25, you're not going to be able to go too deep in the talent tree. In fact, you're only going to be able to get to the 4th tier, and you're only going to get one in it. But for the longest time in Vanilla WoW, Shamans have had some good defensive talents, like shield specialization, for example, where with 5 points, it increases your chance to block attacks with a shield by 5%, and increases the amount blocked by 25%, as well as 5% dodge from anticipation. We know it's been a long time tradition for people to try and tank effectively and efficiently on an enhancement Shaman, but now you can actually do it. Let's go through all of the glove runes first. So first of all, you're going to get Lava Burst, where you hurl molten lava at the target, dealing 198 to 256 fire damage, and if your Flame Shock is on the target, Lava Burst will deal a critical strike. That is definitely for those Ellie enjoyers, and to most of us that have played more than just vanilla, it's nothing new. For the enhancement Shamans, you're going to get Lava Lash, where you charge your offhand weapon with lava, instantly dealing 100% offhand weapon damage, and damage is increased by 20% if your offhand weapon is enchanted with Flame Tongue. Instantly, you're like, offhand weapon as a Shaman? We use two-handed weapons in vanilla. Well, you'd be right. Even looking through the talents, we know Weapon Mastery increases the damage you deal with all weapons. You get Storm Strike. You get two-handed axes and maces, so it allows you to use big two-handed weapons, but there's nowhere where you get Dual Wield. Dual Wield wasn't actually added until 2.0.1, and it was a talent. And it was a talent all the way up until Mr. Pandaria, where then it became a passive ability. Now, on the basis it's not added as a rune, it's not added as a talent, it looks like you're going to get it as a passive ability, and it's only about 5 expansions early, so cool. The reason I say it's added as a passive, because there's a lot of confusion over Dual Wield Specialization, which is a chest rune, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But next up on the gloves, you get Molten Blast, which is the first introduction of an actual tanking rune for the Shaman. But when you read this, you can do more than tank with it. It blasts enemies in a cone in front of you for 39 to 54 fire damage. This ability generates a high amount of threat, and Flame Shock periodic damage has a 10% chance to reset the cooldown on it. So as you can imagine, even as leveling as enhancement normally, this could be more valuable than Lava Lash, because Lava Lash always has, and probably will be in Season of Discovery, a little bit lackluster. So the ability to use a conal attack and its cooldown is reset even while you're just out soloing gives you a lot of options. This is why I really like the state Shaman looks like it's going to be in Season of Discovery, because none of these are set in stone. There is actually a lot of options. As a Shaman who's going to be tanking, you would imagine Molten Blast is going to be your bread and butter. And then finally, Water Shield. We're all familiar with Water Shield from future expansions, but you're surrounded by 3 globes, granting 1% of your max mana every 5 seconds. When a spell, melee, or ranged attack hits the caster, 4% of the max mana is restored to the caster. This expends a water globe, and only 1 globe can be activated every few seconds. Again, you're instantly looking at that thinking, oh great, well that's how Resto Shaman glove rune straight away. That's what you're going to always use. As a Resto Shaman, I agree, you're always going to use it. But there is a world where you could use that as Ellie. If you was using it as Ellie just to keep your mana up all the time and you're not using Lava Burst, you're just going to be using Lightning Bolt instead, keeping shock up, for example, it could be a really good way to reduce the amount of downtime between pulls while you're leveling to 25. Again, this is what I actually love about the Shaman runes. All of these have got a place, no matter what spec you play. Moving on to chest runes, because I alluded to the dual wield specialization rune already. What this actually does is increases your chance to hit with both spells and melee attacks by 5% while dual wielding, and your Storm Strike ability now hits with both weapons. So this is assuming that you can already use dual wield. It's not this rune that actually enables you to use dual wield. And the other interesting thing about this talent is you're getting that 5% hit for spells and melee, which is great. Obviously, there's like 5% hit is absolutely amazing. But what you got to remember in phase 1 is you're not going to have Storm Strike. You don't get that until level 40 because that's at the bottom of the enhancement tree. So for this rune, you are literally only gaining the 5% hit, which could make your decisions a little bit more difficult. But let's find out. Next up for Resto Shamans, and I would say exclusively Resto Shamans, would be Healing Rain. Healing Rain doesn't look like it's going to work the same in Season of Discovery as it does in future expansions, because what it actually does here is it selects an area 15 yards around the target player and heals all of the target player's party members within that area for 20 seconds. Now, Healing Rain in future expansions, where it gets introduced in Cataclysm, actually is just a ground AoE. You don't target it on a player, you just put a ground AoE down on the floor and everybody who stands in it gets healed. This is only party-wide. So you're going to put it on an individual, and it looks like everyone who's in that player's party around them will get the heal over 20 seconds. It looks like it is only going to be party-wide going by the tooltip, and the people will need to be stood in that area for the whole 20 seconds to basically get the healing. Next up is Overload, and Overload is absolutely amazing now, because again, it's not only for Ellie Shamans. It gives your Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Chain Heal, Healing Wave, and Lava Burst. A 33% chance to cast a second similar spell on the same target at no additional cost, for half of their damage or healing and 0 threat. Wow. I mean, for Resto Shamans, chain healing and getting Overload procs, that's going to be crazy. And the fact that it works on Lava Burst as well, obviously Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning we expect, but I love the fact that this has actually been made into a healing rune as well. So you've got a choice between this and Healing Rain. Now, if Healing Rain requires your party to stand in that rune, I would say Overload is the go-to healing talent, as well as, at the moment, it's looking like the go-to elemental talent. And then finally, Shield Mastery, where there's not really any way around this. This is your tanking rune for your chest. Each time you block, you regenerate mana equal to 4% of your max mana, and you gain armor equal to 30% of your shield's armor value, stacking up to 5 times. You also always gain 10% increased chance to block and 15% increased block value. Now, of course, to keep your mana up, it's increasing your armor, it's increasing your block. Like, it's a no-brainer that as a Shaman tank, you're going to be using this. But is there a world where actually while you're leveling, you could use this? Because most of the time, if you're fighting a mob and you're an Ellie Shaman, they're going to get to you. You know, you'll cast a couple of lightning bolts at range and then they might get to you and hit you a few times. You're going to be using a one-hand and shield most likely. This could keep your mana up, but would you sacrifice this for Overload? Probably not. Instead, you'd probably sacrifice Lava Burst on the gloves to get Water Shield, which is going to keep your mana up. So, again, lots of decisions to be made. Do you use Water Shield and Shield Mastery and not worry about getting those Overload procs, which are RNG at the end of the day? It's random, and this just keeps you pumping all the way to 25. And now moving on to the leg runes. Again, these are absolutely huge. Ancestral Guidance looks like it's going to be a really powerful cooldown. I believe it's a couple of minute cooldown, but for the next 10 seconds, 25% of your damage is converted to healing on up to 3 nearby party members. And then 100% of that healing that you've just done is then converted to damage on your most recent flame shock target. Just extra damage and you're helping heal. Now, it's nearby party members, so positioning is going to be important when you use this, but it's worth noting when it said damage on your most recent flame shock target. So you do need to make sure that you've got Flame Shock on the mob that you actually want benefiting from this extra damage. You know, if you've just had Flame Shock on an ad that's just about to die, you pop this and start nuking the boss, obviously you might miss out on some of this damage. So using it in the right way is going to be important. Earth Shield is going to be pretty much the go-to resto leg rune here because it protects the caster with an earthen shield, reducing casting or channeling time lost when damaged by 30%, and causes attacks to heal the shielded target by 100. This effect only occurs once every few seconds, and it's got 3 charges. You can only keep this on one person at a time, and that one person is generally the tank. Now, Earth Shield is nothing new to us. We've seen Earth Shield in loads of expansions, so when we actually start looking at the last 2 runes, you'll see that as a Resto Shaman, this is probably the one you're going to use. I don't see an occasion where you would use this as an Enhancement Shaman or even an Ellie Shaman, but that'll be made obvious when we look at the next 2. Shamanistic Rage has been changed and for the better. So we know this is a future talent that comes in the game like most of these, or all of them in fact. Shamanistic Rage reduces all damage you take by 20% and you regenerate mana every second for 15 seconds. Mana regenerated per second is equal to 15% of your attack power, 10% of your spell power, or 6% of your healing, whichever value is greatest. So this is really cool that they took a future enhancement talent which was meant to alleviate enhancement mana problems and then made it work for Resto and Elemental. So no matter what Shaman spec you are, you can make really good use of this, but don't sleep on the damage reduction portion. You know, the fact that you can use it as a personal cooldown at a time you also need mana is amazing. I wouldn't say this really lends itself to any individual spec. I would say all 3 specs will make use of this at some time or another. And then finally, Way of Earth. This is only going to be used by tanking shamans. While Rock Biter weapon is active on your main hand weapon, you do 100% increased threat, gain 30% increased health, take 10% reduced damage, and you gain 6% reduced chance to be critically hit by melee attacks. So basically, this is making you crit immune. And then finally, Earth Shock taunts targets to attack you and has a separate cooldown from other shock spells that has its range reduced to melee range. As we work through all the classes, you'll see that any of these tanks that have got ranged abilities by like standard, they end up becoming a melee ability as a taunt. So but that's really cool. I mean, you can see why I'm excited about Shaman now. There is so many options, and I think they're going to be top tier levelers. You know, I mean, they've always been good, don't get me wrong, but this is like absolutely bonkers. If you can get your hands on some of these runes quite early, you're going to have a really good time, and I think you're going to have an amazing time at 25. And I've been saying all along I'm going to do Paladin and then Druid. I think I'm now going to do Paladin then Shaman, so that's going to be interesting. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm diving into all of these in members-only videos, so if you click join, I'm trying to get at least 2 out a week, and we're going to be looking at sort of talent specs, what runes would be good for what situation. It's much more of a, you could almost call it a solo podcast, but just for you members. So thank you to every one of you that have already pressed join, and your names scrolling along the bottom of the screen, and I'll see you on the next one. What are runes in Season of Discovery? I don't know. I've not played the game yet. Oh, but I do know what they are. The whole point of it being called Season of Discovery is because you're going to be discovering things, and one of those things that you're going to discover is runes. Runes can be discovered from quests, the open world, and other secrets that just aren't revealed yet because we're not getting a PTR, we're not getting a beta, so it's not going to be solved, which is what makes this quite exciting. You would expect to get introduction runes just from following the main quest lines, or even just some sort of breadcrumb quest or hint leading you to where some of these runes might be.
When you get to around level 2, however, in the starter zone, your class trainer will offer you a new quest, and this is to go find your first rune. We'll talk about runes in a little bit more in a minute, but after that, after that intro quest, the game simply tells you, go find more.
On the basis we don't know where any of them are, but we do know what they are, I thought it'd be a good time to talk about some of them. I started recording this video and was going to look at every single class's runes and just have a little conversation about them. It ended up being hours long, and I'm not even kidding. So I'm going to do one class at a time, starting with the Paladin. So the rune slots that are going to be available at level 25 are going to be for chest, legs, and gloves. And as we progress through the leveling bands, you're going to unlock more that will go on, let's say, shoulders, boots, cape, wrist, wherever they're going to go. Up until 25, you can get 4 for the chest as a paladin. First one's going to be Seal of Martyrdom, which fills you with Holy Spirit for 30 seconds, causing each of your melee attacks to deal 30% weapon damage to up to 3 nearby targets, but you lose health equal to 10% of the damage inflicted. Whilst this seal is active, your party members within 40 yards each gain mana equal to all the damage you take. Unleashing the seal's energy will judge an enemy, instantly causing 70% weapon damage at the cost of health equal to 10% of the damage inflicted. That seal is not new. Of course, it's changed a little bit. And the thing I love about this straight away is, you probably noticed it lasts 30 seconds. So it's the original sort of form of seals where you're constantly refreshing them, like vanilla. So it's not like you're getting Seal of the Martyrdom and it lasts 10 minutes or it lasts 30 minutes. We're talking 30 seconds at a time. It's also great at the cost of you needing to be healed a little bit more because you're taking damage. You're giving everyone else mana back. The next chest rune is Divine Storm, which is an instant weapon attack causing 110% of weapon damage up to 4 enemies within 8 yards. The Divine Storm heals up to 3 party or raid members, totaling 25% of the damage caused. I think we all know what Divine Storm does, so not really a lot to talk about there. It is literally just Divine Storm, but how cool is that? Horn of Lordaeron is another chest rune. The Paladin blows the Horn of Lordaeron, which increases total strength and agility of all party members within 30 yards by 17. This lasts 2 minutes and is exclusive with Blessing of Might. So Horn of Lordaeron, basically Horn of Winter, but for Paladins. Very cool. Aegis is another chest rune, which increases your block value by 30%, and damaging melee and ranged attacks have a 10% chance to increase your chance to block by 30%. This lasts 10 seconds of 5 blocks. Effect is not cumulative with Redoubt. So what's interesting about this is obviously Redoubt is the first 5 points that you would put into the protection talent tree. If you was Retribution, this does mean that you could use this chest rune maybe just to fill the spot of a tank in a 5-man or something without needing to worry about respecking. You know, these runes are going to be able to be used in quite funky ways. Then we've got 5 different leg runes. First one is Divine Sacrifice, which many of us know and use very regularly as Paladins in Wrath, where 30% of all damage taken by party members within 30 yards is redirected to the Paladin for 10 seconds. Damage which reduces the Paladin below 20% health will break the effect and grant the Paladin 10% increased damage and healing done over 10 seconds. Now that's an interesting change. Actually being able to use it as not only a raid-wide defensive cooldown to reduce damage, but then you also get the benefit of getting 10% extra damage and healing from it once it breaks. I mean, that's pretty cool. These are going to be really tough to choose between. The next leg rune really does make me laugh. Inspiration Exemplar. Your inspiring presence periodically dispels fear and sleep effects on nearby party members. Now you've got to remember they've gone down the route of trying to keep it as vanilla as possible, you know, in terms of lore and everything that's going on. So you have only got Paladins on the Alliance and Shamans on the Horde still. But this is actually their way of balancing that, which I find really, really impressive and quite interesting, especially when we get to the Shaman stuff, because you basically are, as a Paladin now, you can use this leg rune and become a Tremor Totem. If it's a fight where you don't need a Tremor Totem, you don't need that pulsing, you know, fear and sleep effect to be dispelled, you don't use it. And you can change your runes at any time out of combat. So I really like that even on a fight-by-fight basis, what rune you use is going to massively affect the rest of your party, or the rest of your group, or the rest of your raid, and you're going to do it on a fight-by-fight basis. Avengers Shield is a classic, so hurls a holy shield at the enemy, dealing 165 to 197 holy damage, dazing them and jump into additional nearby enemies, and it affects 3 total targets. That's cool. I like it, and obviously as somebody who's played a lot of prop paladin, it'd have been nice if it had the silence effect on it as well, which maybe we'll see at a later date, but at the moment it is just the daze, which that's fine, but having the silence effect attached to it as well would be banging. The next leg enchant is Exorcist. So Exorcism can now be cast on any target and has a 100% increased critical strike chance against undead and demons. So for those of you that maybe haven't really played Wrath, Exorcism is a core part of the rotation, really. You use it with Art of War procs, and it can be used on anything. So really, this leg rune is just turning it into the Wrath of the Lich King Exorcism, which, yeah, pretty cool. Rebuke is another great one. Interrupts spellcasting and prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 2 seconds. You will get Rebuke in Cataclysm, and you get it as all specs. So you'd be able to use Holy, Prot, Ret, doesn't matter. You'd be able to have an interrupt in all 3 specs. So this is great because you can have an interrupt in all 3 specs. It's going to come down to what you're having to sacrifice from the legs. But again, if you was to think of a Holy Paladin as an example, if it's a fight where you need the Pulsing Fear Resist, you'll use that leg enchant. If there's another one, another fight maybe where you're going to be up close and personal with a boss, healing still, you could be part of an interrupt rotation if, let's say, your group just lacks people with interrupts, or lacks people that would need to use a rune to get an interrupt. Interesting. And the final 3 are glove runes. So the first one is an easy one, Beacon of Light. We all know what Beacon of Light is. The target becomes a beacon to all members of your party or raid within 60 yards. Any heals you cast on a party or raid member will heal the Beacon of Light for 100%. And only one target can be a Beacon of Light at a time. As somebody who heals ICC, well, heals everything every single week, this is great. Having this in vanilla is going to feel so funky, to the point where, as a Holy Paladin, there's no other rune you're going to get. I can't imagine. Even if there's other runes that you unlock by level 60 on gloves, you're not going to use anything else, are you? Beacon of Light all the way. It's the same way Crusader Strike on your gloves is an instant strike that causes 75% weapon damage and regenerates 2% of your maximum mana. So you're probably not going to use anything other than that for Ret. And then finally, Hand of Reckoning taunts the target to attack you, but has no effect if the target is already attacking you. And while you know this ability, the threat bonus from Righteous Fury is increased to 80%, and Righteous Fury causes you to gain mana when healed by others equal to 25% of the amount healed. So they've basically put in spiritual attunement, so they've brought all the prop paladin sort of things that make it great in Wrath of the Lich King and onwards, and have baked it all into this one rune. Because additionally, while Righteous Fury is active, damage which takes you below 35% health is reduced by 20%. And that, again, in Wrath of the Lich King is a talent that's a lot further down the tree. And that particular glove rune, as a prop paladin, you wouldn't use anything else, would you? So it looks like the glove runes are almost not optional, and I would say that you're probably going to learn that very early. These are the introductory ones that are going to go on your gloves because they sort of make or break your spec. Keep you waiting too long to get these obviously would be ridiculous, because you're not going to tank without Hand of Reckoning, you're not going to want to heal without Beacon of Light, even though you would, and as a Ret you're going to want Crusader Strike. So my guess would be you'll get these in the starting zone very, very early. But that's all the Paladin runes that we know about up until level 25, and I think it's going to be pretty sick. I'm going Paladin as my first character. My Alliance character is going to be a Paladin, and I'm going to do a Horde Druid. So I'm going to cover Druid next. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. I am going to keep you up to date through all of Season of Discovery, so if you're interested in this game, definitely subscribe, because I'm going to go pretty hard on it, especially all the way up until Kata Classic, where then I can take a bit of a step back and focus more on Kata, because, you know, I'm all about that. So, see you on the next one.
Hello. Today I want to talk to you about my Season of Discovery meta guide, and I'm going to try to go fast because this video keeps it taking too long. Alright, to understand how Season of Discovery is going to shape out, we need to understand how the current vanilla meta works. Alliance is better than Horde for vanilla purely because Paladin's utility is raid-wide. They can buff everyone in the raid, but Hordes can only buff people in the party. Shamans, I should say specifically. Shamans are really good. They have Wind Fury. Now Alliance gets Wind Fury at Season Discovery, but we'll get into that. Class balance, Warriors are by far the best tanks and best DPS that you can have. It's not actually by far the best tank, but they're really good tanks. And then Priests are your best healers, but Shamans are also pretty damn good. The raid goals, it's not to progress. Progression is not an issue in Classic. It's really easy content. It's about speed running. And raid composition, utilities, strategies, everything you're doing is to push speed, not to push can you kill the boss. Just to explain the next couple slides, why I choose Patchwork for DPS rankings. It's a target dummy fight. Obviously, it's not relevant for AoE damage, which is very relevant in a speedrun setting, but the DPS numbers still align. You're still going to see Warriors on top in terms of total trash damage, not just boss damage. Why is SAF good for healer rankings? Taking the whole raid doesn't make sense because a lot of the raid, you're not actually being stressed as a healer. You don't need to put out as much HPS as possible. SAF is a fight where tanks are getting hit a lot. The entire raid's getting hit a lot, and every healer needs to be limit tested for how much they can heal. So DPS rankings, you can see Warriors way ahead of the pack here. They're doing almost 1500 DPS, whereas a Paladin or more than half the classes are doing 900 or less. They're just so far ahead of every other class, it's not even close. And these are the top 90%, by the way. The actual median is way lower for many of these classes compared to the top 90%. Healers, you can see Healer Priests are just way ahead. Prayer of Healing does an insane amount of healing, but even if you're just casting Greater Heal, Healer Priests just have way more healing on their abilities. If you look at like a Paladin, Flash of Light heals for like 500 base. A Flash Heal heals for like 900 base. There's just a massive difference in the amount of healing that a Priest can put out compared to other classes. Tank meta, there's only two classes, so there's no point in having a graph up here, so I just talked about it. There's only two tanks, and it's important to understand why Warriors are chosen. So it's not that Warriors are actually better overall. Druid's actually
I bet this guy plays Warrior.
A Fury tank, dual-wielding Warrior, and not a Sword and Board Warrior who's Fury Prot. Druid will still do more threat, especially with MCPs. With MCPs, Druid threat is off the charts. But the big difference is mitigation. Mitigation is not really an issue for 90% of fights in Classic WoW. A lot of bosses just sort of don't hit hard. But for the bosses that do hit hard, Druids are not crit immune. They can be crit and they can be crushed. And there's nothing they can really do to prevent that. They can build defense to prevent the crit, but it's not going to do that much. And they can never push crushes off. They're always going to get crushed. They just have to face tank it. They get a lot of armor, a lot of health. But on fights like Patchwork, where they just hit like a truck, Druids are just, you can't run Druid there. So because of that, you can run a Warrior in 100% of scenarios. You can only run Druids in 90%. People usually just stick with one Warrior as their main tank, or set of Warriors. Druids are viable, though. You can main tank 90% of fights on a Druid. It's just a couple that are really hard for Druids. And even then, you can still make it work. It's just not as good. Also, one more thing for Warriors. Warriors have cooldowns. Druids don't. So when a Druid can pop... Warrior can pop like shield wall, last stand, whatever, and that can really clutch in like enrage parts of fights. Optimal comp, just to show you like what the meta looks like today. You can clearly see this is the whole comp is basically built around the idea of how many Furies can you shove into one raid comp. Even the Protection Warriors are going to be Fury Prot, so it's not like they're not able to put out damage when they're not doing it. To explain some of the weird ones, Marksman is just there to pull. You don't actually need a Marksman Hunter. A lot of raids run without them. The raid I'm in runs with one. It's convenient to keep, for a speedrun setting, as a sort of quality of life feature to have the Hunter there to pull more packs. The Rogue, you could bring two Rogues. You bring them for kicks and IEA. You need one for IEA. You don't even need IEA, so you could probably cut all your Rogues and be absolutely fine. But IEA is a net damage increase over the course of the raid, so it's good to have. For the casters, you might be thinking, wow, Fire Mages must be good. You bring four of them. You only bring the Mages because they decurse. If Warriors could decurse, you would not bring any of those casters in Group 8. You would just bring more Warriors. And Group 7 would just be one decurse lock and a bunch of healers. If you're on Horde, you swap all the Priests here with Shamans. And then Group 1 would be a Shaman as well. And then the priests would be sitting in group 7. They wouldn't get off the prayer feelings, but you have chain heal, so that covers your AoE healing. How does Sod change the meta? Well, Sod adds runes, as I'm sure everyone's aware by now, and the runes are absolutely busted. Some of these runes are so strong, you'd probably give up entire talent trees to get them. They're just unbelievably powerful, and the actual power ranking of every single class is going through the roof, especially for the meme specs. So expect a big shakeup. With the runes we've released so far, this guide is going to be basically answering the question, if we hit 60 with only the runes we have today, how would that look? Like, what would the meta look like? What would we expect to be on top? And that maybe can give you an idea going into future content phases, because maybe the runes continue to follow a similar pattern, but we'll see. Warrior. So Warrior didn't really get anything super exciting. Nothing that's really like, oh wow, this is going to change the way Warrior plays, except for maybe Warbringer and PvP. But they did just get a lot of just percent damage increases while they're already the best DPS class in the game. It's probably going to be at least a net 25 to 30% damage increase, if not more, for Fury Warriors across the board. I guarantee by the time the runes are out, Fury Warriors are going to be doing 2k DPS at least. And they are going to be an absolute DPS monster. This is probably the strongest DPS buffs so far we've seen for our class, and they're already on top. So if you're worried about Warriors not being in a good spot at 60, barring some new runes coming out, then you're probably going to be safe to roll a Warrior and be DPS. Tanking, though, they didn't really get much tanking support, and a lot of other classes got a lot of tanking support. The Prot Warriors, they don't get crit immune like almost every other tank in the game gets now, but they do still have shield block, which allows them to push crushes and crits off the table while that's up. So Sword and Board Warriors are still going to be really good mitigation tanks, and by default they'll be able to mitigate a ton of damage even without good gear. So it's still a good choice, but probably the meta is going to be druids, and I'll get more into that later. For PvP, Warbringer is so good for PvP. This is going to change up how warriors play. You're no longer going to be just food for frost mages. So yeah, expect warrior plus healer to be even more of a menace now. Paladin, so deep Ret Paladins get a lot this expansion. They are going to be doing significantly more damage, but they're not going to be matching warriors so far. Maybe if we see more talents come out, or runes come out, more gear options come out, we can see Rets come up to that, get close to that. But for the time being, they're just not. They didn't get the same level of support they would need to start matching warriors and DPS. They do get a lot of utility, though, and that's going to be sort of your way to weasel your way into raids as a Ret Paladin, probably. You get Tremor Totem now. You have a lot of stuff. You get that like bonuses to your party. So there's a lot of stuff you bring as a Ret Paladin now. Healing, you get Beacon of Light. You didn't really get much, but you get like probably one of the most broken things in the game that you could have gotten out of Paladin. A lot of Paladin healing in raid is literally just spamming heals into the tank. So when you have Beacon of Light, you are basically doubling your healing output, which is pretty insane. You're probably still going to be behind Holy Priests in terms of, certainly in terms of raid healing, but Paladins are now way, way stronger healers, and you're not going to feel bad bringing extra Paladins like you would today. Tanking, they get Taunt, they get some good abilities. They have a decent amount, like it's entirely possible that they can get to a passive mitigation where they only block, dodge, parry, or miss every single attack bosses has on them. But it requires a lot of defense. They probably have to give up a lot of threat for that. I'm not sure Paladins are going to be the meta tank, but they seem viable, at least. PvP, Rets get a lot of stuff in PvP, but I don't think... They're probably going to be good against the new Warlock tank, which is going to be a good counter, because the Warlock tank looks busted. But I don't think they're going to be... they're going to be good in 1v1s. I don't think they're going to be good in a lot of other scenarios. But we'll see. Hunter got a lot of support to buff their damage. I mean, Lone Wolf is just practically a 25% damage increase at max level by itself, because your pet dies 80% of the time anyway, and their damage never scales. So it's already a lot of damage there. And then sniper training, if you just don't move, a lot of fights in Classic you don't need to move. So getting extra 30% crit strike chance on your shots is pretty insane. You also get Melee Hunter now. It's hard to say whether or not Melee Hunter would be good. They do seem to get quite a bit of support. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to outweigh the damage Ranged Hunter is going to do, but it does look like you're getting quite a lot, so keep an eye out for that. PvP, Hunters get disarmed with Chimera Shot. That's going to help them a lot in sort of like the rogue and warrior matchups if they're getting close. They still have the dead zone, so it's going to be kind of hard. They don't really have a way of beating frost mages, so still we expect to be really good in open world PvP where you can just permanently kite people. Don't expect to be like 1v1 gods. Shaman. Okay, so casters, elementals get a bunch this expansion. Dear lord. So they get overload, so they get the TBC talent, but it applies to Lava Burst too, which is insane. So you can get a double cast on both your Lava Burst and Chain Lightning, and with Elemental Mastery, you can literally get a guaranteed double crit Lava Burst Chain Lightning, and maybe have an overcast there. The damage that Elemental Shamans are going to be putting out is pretty insane. I don't know if it's going to be enough to outweigh mages in their range DPS, but in PvP, they're going to be a menace. So watch out for that. They will be globaling people in PvP all over the place. Melee, you get dual wield. Generally speaking, a lot of classes that can dual wield do a lot of damage in Classic WoW. So it's looking pretty decent. I don't think they're going to have the same support that a Fury Warrior is going to have, or a Rogue, but they look like they're not going to be griefing by picking one so far. You never know how it's going to shape up. If they get Maelstrom Weapon, we could see this change up. We could see that sort of Spellhand style from Phase 1 Waddle K come out, but it's not going to be... I don't think it's up there yet, but we'll have to see with the range coming out. Tanking, they actually... So Shaman tanks are shockingly tanky. This armor value increase is pretty insane. And I think they become crit immune or something like that as well. The block value part of Shield Mastery and their other talents is pretty useless because block value is kind of a meme in Classic. It's just a flat reduction on the amount of damage you would take when you block.
Yeah.
It's really not that much. I mean, you'll get hit by 5,000 pre-armor, and the block value reduced 200 of it. It just doesn't make a big difference. Healing. Rest of Shamans do get some.
The main block
here,
thing is
really
what's useful about it is the mana regen.
I mean, they get Healing Rain, they get some classic abilities like Earth Shield, but nothing that's going to really push the needle for Resto Shamans like Eclipsing Priests or anything like that. PvP, I already talked about Elemental Shamans. That's probably the biggest winner here. Elemental Shamans, again, they're not good in 1v1s. They never have been. They never will be. But in a group setting, just watch out for the Elemental Shaman. If you give them a couple seconds to cast, they will global people. Wind Fury, of course, can do that too for Enhanced Shaman, but watch out for LA Shamans. It's going to be consistent, and it's going to be scary. Yeah, Druid. Druid's probably the biggest winner so far of all the runes, most notably in just the fact that Ferals get Wild Strikes, and that is insane. So if you don't know, now Feral Druids give Wind Fury to their party. That is a massive DPS increase. They were already giving crit with the leader of the pack. Now they're giving Wild Strikes as well. If you're a cat, I did some quick math. It's probably going to come out to, I don't know what the percent it's going to come out to, but if we just assume 10, 12% with crit and Wind Fury bonus damage to a warrior, and it's probably a conservative estimate, you know, you take that times 4, add that to the damage a cat's doing. A cat plus 4 Fury Warriors is probably better than 5 Fury Warriors. So you're going to want to bring Feral Cats. And it's convenient because they are the same exact spec as bears. And feral bears are looking really strong, mainly because of survival of the fittest. You see, one of the only things holding back bears in Classic WoW was simply the fact you basically couldn't run them on fights like Patchwork, because they would just get clapped because they do not have a way to push off crushes and crits like a warrior does, and they just have to face tank everything. And so now, because by the reduction in chance to be melee critically hit by melee attacks by 6%, that just means you're crit immune. Bosses have a 5.6% chance to crit you. So you're just crit immune. That's huge. And you reduce all damage taken by 20%. That means your crushing blows are effectively hitting for like 120% or something like that. 130. I think it's, whatever it is. But so you can't run these both simultaneously as a bear, unfortunately. So if you're bear tanking, for most fights, you probably won't need Survival of the Fittest, so you're just going to run Wild Strikes. And then when the Patchwork comes up, you're going to swap your rune to Survival of the Fittest, and you will be able to maintain that. So bear tanks are now completely viable, and the fact that they were already threat monsters, and that's only going to get better with Lacerate coming in the game now, just expect bears to be absolutely insane, especially if MCP continues to exist. I don't see why it wouldn't, but you never know what they're going to change. Caster DPS, Boomkins get a lot. It's not going to be enough so far to outweigh fire mages and potentially arcane mages. We'll get to that later. But they're not, you're not griefing by playing a Boomkin now. They have the best mana talent, best mana rune that's ever been printed. Wrath is free now, so your filler ability is just free. So that's really convenient for you. Resto Druids get a lot in this in the runes, but nothing that's really insane so far. Like, there's still the problem of they're still very hot based in a meta where everyone snipes, and it's not really gonna be. They're not really gonna be the huge HPS pumping machines that priests are. I don't see them, or even shamans. I don't see them pushing more healing than them. You also don't need to really bring that Resto Druid anymore now that you have so many Feral Druids you'll probably want to run. So you get a lot of buffs as a Resto Druid. You're probably not as strong as the other, like the Feral Druid specs. PvP, you get a kick plus charge as a Feral Cat, but nothing that's going to really outshine a lot of the other classes. You can still attrition people as that Resto Feral spec that people have always been doing forever as a Druid, but you're not going to be these 1v1 monsters like a Mage Druid or Mage Rogue or Log. Anyway, speaking of Rogue, DPS gets the Asa rotation, so they get Venom, they get Mutilate, they get Shiv, they get all their poison stuff, including some other ones like Deadly Brew. It's actually looking pretty good. Poison damage was already like just instant poison, like 10% of your damage. It can go up. Honestly, looking at this, I think Asa Dagger Rogue will probably be better than a Combat Dagger or Combat Sword Rogue, but it's hard to say until we can get in and really run sims and everything. But it's looking really good for the Asa Rogues, and either way, even if Asa wasn't better, Slaughter from the Shadows on Backstab is insane. It pushes Backstab to definitely being like Dagger Combat to probably being the best spec, even with the new Saber Slash for Sword Rogues. So expect to see way more at least expect to see more single target damage. I still don't think they take the spot from from Warriors who just got straight up like 25% more damage, 25% more damage, 10% more damage. That's the 3 runes you get as a Fury Warrior. It's just insane what they printed for Fury Warrior. Tanking, okay. Rogue tanks are going to be a meme at first. They are by far the squishiest of the tanks because all of their mitigation is just avoidance. So they either take no damage or all the damage. And the problem is, now they are crit immune, which they just gave to everyone nowadays, except for Paladins and Warriors, but they only avoid or just take full damage. But the problem is, although that sucks, and that's literally the opposite of what you want from a tank, because you never want, the last thing you want is spiky damage. You would rather take more overall damage but have it be less spiky as a tank than take less damage but have it come in big spikes. Because you get a couple spikes in a row as a rogue, you're just dead. You don't get the armor buff that everyone else is getting. You're just going to get cooked over. The problem is that if you read ahead, vanilla rogues before these runes were already able to push 70 to 80% avoidance with gear and buffs and you know the plus the insect swarm gives like 2% chance to miss the boss. Obviously, you have marbles or something. There's a lot of ways you can push avoidance, and you can literally get with these new runes to 100% avoidance. You can dodge, parry, or miss every single hit a boss does. Take literally 0 damage. So, I mean, rogues I don't think are going to be that good at first, but watch out by the end of the expansion. We probably will, unless Blizzard changes something or messes with the gear, we're probably going to see rogues hit 100% chance to dodge, parry, or miss an attack, and will literally just take no damage from bosses. I don't even know if bosses apply their boss mechanics if they can't hit you. So it's pretty insane. So I would say keep an eye out for them. They're definitely like the rogue tank is a dark horse. In PvP, rogues are already strong. They actually don't get anything that's going to particularly buff them. I mean, obviously, Slaughter from the Shadows is going to give you more combo points as a rogue, but you really didn't need help. No one really got stuff to help them get out of your flowchart CC chains. So you're probably still going to be 100 to 0ing people in 1v1. Rogues have never been insane in group content, so you're probably not going to be excelling there. But in 1v1s, open world PvP, you're still rogues. You're still the gods of PvP in 1v1s. Priest actually did get a whole lot this expansion. They're probably like the biggest losers, if I had to say so. They do get some good stuff. So for DPS, let's talk about DPS. I think there's a lot of Shadow Priests kind of coping, saying that like they're going to be viable now. There's a lot of problems with Shadow DPS outside. First off, none of the runes help their mana so far. So I assume we'll get a rune in the future for Shadow Priest, and by the way, I play Priest, that is going to increase mana regen. But the problem is, Shadow spells just don't scale well. That Mind Flay and Shadow Word Pain and I'm sure whatever, the new Void disease or whatever, they can't crit. So all of your spell, like all of your world buffs, increase your crit chance, and so you don't really scale with world buffs like a Fire Mage does, where Fireball always can crit, right? You can crit on Fireballs, you can't crit on Mind Flay, you can't crit on your dots, and that makes up a lot of your damage. On top of that, Shadow Priests have just some of the worst spell power scaling in the game. And saying, okay, you do 20% more damage with your Mind Flay and Mind Blast, it still scales terribly with spell power. So until that scaling goes up, or there's something that really pushes them over the top, it's just not that good, unfortunately. But they're better now. You're probably not griefing by playing a Shadow Priest now, which is what I think Blizzard was going for, but you're not going to be doing more damage than the Mage. Healing, you're still the strongest healer in the game, I think. You already had such a healthy lead with how much healing output Priest could put out. It's probably going to get even better. Prayer of Mending doesn't do a whole lot, but it does give you some more AoE options. You also have Circle of Healing. You have Power Barrier, which is going to be a good raid soak mechanic for, maybe if a tank party needs it or something. So watch out for that. I mean, you can already see Power Barrier be used on the last phase patchwork or something like that. Like there's a lot of spots you'd use Power Barrier, so expect them to be used, expect them to be played. Priests are going to be great healers. PvP, Shadow Priests have always been really strong in 1v1s. They're sort of like the class everyone forgets about in 1v1s that are really OP just because of how durable they are. The shield gives them a lot. They have physical damage reduction with Shadow Form. They have a lot of armor with Inner Fire. They heal a lot with Vampiric Touch. If you have Undead, you have Devouring Plague. You now have a bunch more Shadow damage you're doing. They deal good damage in PvP. Not as high as other classes, but they can consistently get it out because they are so tanky. But they for whatever reason, they have like short range spells, so they probably won't be insane in a group PvP setting. But in 1v1s, Shadow Priests have always been monsters. Watch out for them. Homunculi, by the way, I just put it out there, probably going to be a guaranteed one priest is running Homunculi for bosses just for the armor reduction. Mage. So Fire Mage, already really good with Burnout and some Icy Veins and the other things coming out. Burnout, they're just going to be even stronger. I don't know what the actual like DPS increase is going to come out to. Probably 20%, 25% increase on Fire Mage damage so far. The Dark Horse though is Arcane Blast. They gave mages Arcane Blast, and if you play TBC and you remember what happens when a mage cannot care about their mana in a fight, because the downside of Arcane Blast is that it does more damage, ramping more damage, but it costs more mana. But if you have mages and you just give them Innervate and they have ways of, like, they print a rune, it's like you take, your mana doesn't go down for the next 5 seconds or something. Like, watch out for Arcane Mages, because I guarantee you if this goes on and we get a lot of support for mages and their mana, you're going to see them just pump damage. Healing, mage healing in a raid is viable. It will 100% be viable. I don't think they'll do the healing output of other classes, but they are very strong healers in raid. And because mages have a lot of ways to regenerate mana, they have their gems and they have Evocate. That's already a ton of mana they get back on top of their giant mana pools. They are really good healers just for long fights. They will consistently be healing. They won't heal as much, but they will do a lot. And then also, if there's a big blast that comes out, like AoE hits everyone, the rewind time does a lot of instant cast healing there, and that's pretty insane. Frost Mage in PvP is going to be nuts. They got Ice Lance, and Fingers of Frost. There's almost nothing more you could have asked for. I mean, except maybe Deep Freeze and some other abilities, which, God forbid, those might be coming. Watch out for Frost Mages. They're going to be insane. They're going to blast a lot of classes, maybe not Warlock. All right, let's talk about Warlock. Warlocks are getting a Firelock package. That's already pretty good. The Firelock was doing quite a lot of damage in TBC. We're kind of seeing these TBC kits and other retail spells come online. I think based on what I've seen so far, it does look like it will be doing more damage than a Shadow Lock, but it's hard to really say. It'll probably be close. I don't think they'll be doing more damage than a Mage. I just don't think the support is there so far. Warlock tanking, what everyone's talking about, it looks cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, you look sick. They're probably the least viable tank, but they're still able to tank. The problem is that your 500% armor increase on cloth armor is not really enough to mitigate, and you do get, yes, like that 20% reduction, can't be crit or whatever. Actually, I don't even know if
bottom left
You do a lot of
ashtray
stealthing things.
cam
The problem is you're just
angle is
not
based.
as nitty tanky. You're still gonna get crushed. You don't have the armor values. Like you don't really have that mitigation or a cooldown mitigation that other classes do. You're gonna be the squishiest tank, and it doesn't really seem like because of that you're gonna be super viable. I don't know what their threat's gonna be. Their threat could be through the roof, but I don't. It seems like druids and warriors are probably gonna retain the best tank spot, but you probably could raid tank with them for sure. PvP tank warlock looks like it's going to be absolutely busted in PvP. I like looking at the abilities. I wonder if they even thought about PvP when they're building this. Like you're going to get instant cast spells.
What's up,
you have
Luke?
taunt, you have master channeler now, which is going to give you that. You're going to be able to go siphon or soul link or siphon life with your pet. You're going to have the resistance from your fel hunter. You get defensive dispel. Tank warlocks are going to be a problem, like an actual problem, and it is insane to me that they exist. So watch out for them. They will just be farming people in open world PvP. How's the specs shaping up so far? Obviously, this is based on this list I created is based on what would these specs look like at 60 if we just teleported to 60 tomorrow and it wasn't just a 25 cap. So Fury Warriors are probably still the best DPS, and they'll probably, well, it looks like they're going to retain that DPS spot. They've already gotten a lot of support. A lot of the other classes need to play catch up. I don't think they're getting enough to catch up. They might get in close, but I don't think anyone's going to beat up Fury Warriors for the time being. We'll see what runes come. Holy Paladins got a huge buff. You're going to love running Holy Paladins. They probably don't put out the HPS of Priests, but you're going to see the actual raid healing amount go up a lot now that Holy Paladins have Beacon of Light. Ferals, I'm including bears and cats with Ferals. It's the same spec, basically. Both are now very viable. You're going to want to run bears for Wind Fury, even if they were less viable in terms of their mitigation. Just giving Wind Fury to their group is already probably enough to justify bears and cats over warriors. So you're going to start running ferals. If you're a feral, it's a good time to be a feral. Prot warriors, they still can easily push off crushes and crits with shield block, and they can get that up for like 2/3 or 75% of hits they take. So they're already really good mitigation tanks. Their threat's not bad. They do get some stuff to buff their threat while sword and boarding.
Did I get ganked yet?
They'll probably still be one of the best tanks.
I have actually once, like,
Firewalk and Firebase probably just going to be really good damage dealers.
hold
You're going
on.
to run Warlocks because
It was like in Hellfire Peninsula. I did get ganked once, actually. How do I, there we go. I remember where I was at, actually. I was like, where was I? Somewhere around here, I think. Or no, yeah, I was doing the demon quest, so it was somewhere like around this area. Or no, that's where you bomb them. Somewhere around here in the Legion front area. It was like an Affliction Warlock, I remember. Yeah, that was like the one time. This is like a Horde server. I mean, there is people that are Alliance that play on here, but you rarely see them.
you have to run them for the curses. Fire mages just do a ton of damage. They can still decurse. The priests, obviously, I still think they're going to be top. They're already pumping out a lot of heals. They got some good spells. They're probably going to continue to get more healing spells. Just expect them to be top tier healers. Same thing with Resto Shamans. They give the Wind Fury Totem. I won't get into all the specs below this, but I will call out some of the Dark Horses. Arcane Mage, I called that out. That Dark Horses are specs that today, with just the runes have been announced, they're probably not going to be top. But depending on like Arcane Mage, how long the boss fights are. If they're short, you're going to want to run Arcane Mage. And Arcane Mage, like Hunters, like there's a lot of support they're getting. It's probably not enough yet, but watch out what's on the horizon. They might be better. Ellie Shamans, both Shamans. Rogues are getting a lot. A lot of support, passive, and combat. I expect their single target damage to go up a lot. Their single target damage might eclipse Warriors, but they don't have the AoE damage yet. Maybe they'll get Fan of Knives. But Rogue tanks and Shaman tanks, like keep an eye out for. I don't think Shaman tanks will be as good, but Rogue tanks might be.
Shut
insane.
your whore mouth. Yes, they will
and then
be.
Everything below that, yeah, it's just they're getting some, but they're not getting a whole lot. I don't think they're going to be good in a raid setting. So yeah, that's the meta overview for Assad. Thank you so much.
I'll give him a like.
On the 30th of November, class design is about to be totally redefined for Classic WoW. Seasonal Discovery isn't just vanilla classes with a little bit more spice, but they're being totally redesigned from the ground up with a heavy focus on more fun and hybridization. And honestly guys, I think Blizzard are only just getting started. In the future, it wouldn't surprise me if things became even more groundbreaking. It's great to see Blizzard actually taking some risks and experimenting with what a Classic Plus server can become. And nonetheless, these new class additions at a first glance can be a little overwhelming. I mean, what class should you even play now with all of the changes? Well, by the end of the video, you should have a better idea on what class to roll, or you get so excited that the decision becomes even harder. Just remember guys that the theme of this seasonal server is discovery, so if you think that learning stuff about SOD before you've played it will actually ruin the experience for yourself, here's a crazy idea. Turn the video off now instead of moaning like a typical WoW baby in the comment section. So as you know, in SOD they are adding runes to the game. They are similar to legendary affixes in Diablo 4. They will add a class talent or a totally new ability from the many different WoW expansions, and they are actually obviously assigned to your gear pieces. Be sure to watch the whole video as many new abilities have been data mined. For instance, a gladiator stance for warriors that will allow them to use stance specific abilities in all stances. But remember, data mined abilities are definitely not.
I remember gladiator stance. That was actually fucking OP as fuck. That was like a 4th warrior spec in Warlords.
So that the druid isn't just a healer at endgame, but also to make the healing spec a little more interesting. We have the addition of Savage Roar, Mangle, and the data mined Tiger's Fury. The Pharaoh Druid will definitely be powerful enough with this toolkit to make them a formidable DPS like the Iron Wrath of the Lich King. And the same goes for balance with the addition of Star Surge and Sunfire. Interestingly, Sunfire can also be used in bear and cat form, so it's going to be nice for when bear tanks want to do some ranged pulling. They will also have a party-wide buff called Wild Strikes, which is basically Wind Fury Totem, and there's also this ability called Furious Stormrage that allows a healer to spam Wrath for no mana cost, and basically allows the possibility for you to be a hybrid DPS and healer. Healing druids can also get Life Bloom, Living Seed, and Wild Growth. By the way guys, if you want to see every single ability that is confirmed to be added in Season of Discovery, I have made a huge spreadsheet of them all for every single class. All you gotta do is subscribe to the channel and go to my subscriber only trailer. And if you want to level up your characters and your professions really fast when Season of Discovery drops, be sure to check out Zygor's guides. They're going to be going all out for when Season of Discovery drops, making guides for every element of the game, so be sure to check that out. Hunter runes seem to be more focused on making your rotation more interesting, while also allowing you to be a more viable melee DPS. This is made possible by Flanking Strike, where you and your pet simultaneously deal 100% melee damage, but it can also boost the damage of Mongoose Bite and Raptor Strike, and then also Raptor Strike has a chance to reset the cooldown on Flanking Strike. You also get this very strong cleave melee attack ability called Carve that strikes every target in front of you. You also have the option to ditch your pet for 25% increased damage. This will likely be the meta strategy for anyone not playing Beast Mastery. They seem to have taken a lot of influence in the retail version of Marksman, especially as you can get the Sniper Training Rune, which increases your crit chance by 30% when you haven't moved in 6 seconds. You will also get Cobra Strike, the Exposed Weakness debuff added in TBC, and also an ability to make your multi-shots also trigger a Serpent Sting. You've got classic stuff like Kill Command, Explosive Shot, Chimera Shot, and the Beast Mastery talent, which basically turns your pet into Mike Myers. Interestingly, a new aspect has been data mined called Aspect of a Lion that increases all stats by 20% and all party member stats nearby by 10%. I imagine that's going to be the main meta play for a melee hunter. There's also a buff that's been data mined, literally called Warlock Pet buff, and it hints that pets will actually scale with your stats because they didn't actually in the original vanilla. Mage runes will allow you to be any kind of mage that you want to be because of all the hybridization, but also weirdly allow you to become a healing DPS hybrid. I think instead of mage having 3 DPS specs, Arcane will become a healer hybrid. People think that it's a bit cringe, but to me it makes sense. I mean, there have been many wizard mage characters in other fantasy universes that are healers, like for example the sorceresses in the Witcher franchise. Regeneration is a long hot effect that doesn't do as much healing as a typical hot, but converts 100% of your arcane damage into healing through the Temporal Beacon buff. This simultaneously applies when you put regeneration on the target, but can also be applied by a new AoE heal called Mass Regeneration. And the rewind ability will reverse the damage taken in the last 5 seconds by all targets with Temporal Beacon. They've also added a very hard-hitting arcane damage ability called Arcane Surge that deals damage based on your remaining mana, scaled by 300% of your total mana, but it does actually consume all of the mana and increases regeneration after. I really don't want to know what this is going to be like combined with a Pom Pyroblast. Iconic mage talents and spells have also been added like Fingers of Frost, Burnout, Living Flame, Icy Veins, Ice Lance, Arcane Blast, and Living Bomb. The improved elemental ward talents from TBC have also been data mined. Paladins would be glad to know that their new runes will make Ret and Protection perfectly viable in raiding. They've added Avenger Shield, a Taunt, Aegis, which is an ability similar to Holy Shield, Divine Storm, Seal of Amata, which is basically the TBC Seal of Blood, and also obviously Crusader Strike. Exorcism can be used on any target. They also added Divine Sack and Rebuke, which is the Paladin's Kick, which is interestingly not even in Wrath of the Lich King yet. And weirdly, they have this new one called Horn of Lordaeron, which is basically the Death Knight's Horn of Winter. Beacon of Light has also been added, with an ability that can debuff Fear and Sleeps. Data mining also shows buffs to Righteous Fury, and they might be adding Rebound, which was a TBC talent that increases your chance to block after you receive a crit. The Priest runes will focus on adding multiple healing playstyles and making Shadow Spec more viable. Strength of the Soul reduces the duration of the Weakened Soul debuff on the target when you use healing abilities on them, making speccing Deepen Discipline very likely worth it. There's an extra dot called Void Plague that's been added, and along with Mindseer, so Priest will actually do some competent AoE DPS. There's a new cooldown called Homunculi, I have no idea how it's pronounced. It's basically similar to a Mage's Mirror Image. Souls will attack the target and debuff it. Shadow Word Pain can also be automatically spread to nearby targets with the Shared Pain rune. Surrender Pity has also been added, which is a buff that speeds up the cast time of your big, longer heals when you cast your small, faster, cheap heals. Twisted Faith boosts the damage of Mind Flay and Mind Blast, and the Priest will also get some of his iconic abilities like Prayer of Mending, Circle of Healing, Penance, Shadow Word Death, and Shadow Word Barrier. Rogue runes will focus on making poisons more viable, but only in theory for Horde because, as you know, they would have to change how Wind Fury works and how it interacts with weapons. They're adding some iconic rogue toolkit abilities that always felt missing from vanilla, while also strangely making the concept of a rogue tank viable. This is made possible by the rune Just a Flesh Wound. It turns Blade Flurry into a defensive cooldown and turns Feint into a taunt. You also get a finishing move called Blade Dance that increases parry chance to a maximum of 10%, and a new strike ability called weirdly Main Gauche or Gooch. Sounds a bit strange, sounds a bit rude to be honest, but anyway, and essentially does the same, so that's a constant 20% constant parry chance in theory. Slaughter from the Shadows makes backstab and ambush cost 20 less energy, and they've also added some iconic ranged abilities from the Outlaw Rogue spec on retail like Quick Draw, which is similar to Concussive Shot, and Between the Eyes that buffs attack power and causes a stun. We've also got some other classic stuff like Deadly Brew, Envenom, Saber Slash, Mutilate, and Star Strike has also been added. Shiv has also been data mined. Shaman, as you probably guessed by now, has had their meme specs made more viable. Elemental will be buffed by abilities like Lava Burst and Overload that has a chance to cast an extra spell for half the damage, and Enhancement will get Dual Wield and Lava Lash. Weirdly, Shamans have also been given the power to tank with the addition of Shield Mastery, a stacking armor increasing buff that regenerates mana, and the Way of the Earth rune that increases
They
threat
already
and
tanked
turns
before
Earthshock
this.
into a taunt. They also have a hybrid healing cooldown called Ancestral Guidance, where 25% of your damage converts to healing on 3 nearby party members, but it's increased to 100% if your target is affected by Flame Shock. This is very similar to the Priest Vampiric Embrace that was added in TBC, however it's on a cooldown. They've also added a few things to make a healing shaman more interesting, like Healing Rain, Earth Shield, Shamanistic Rage, Water Shield has also been added, and there's also Molten Blast, which is a frontal cone AoE fire damage spell. Warlock runes will allow different playstyles to become more viable, namely dot playstyles, give them some actual good AoE capability, and also Blizzard are finally experimenting with a viable Warlock tank spec. Interestingly, for the first time, Metamorphosis has actually been made a permanent ability. Interestingly, they have made Metamorphosis a permanent form ability, much like a Druid, that comes along with a charge and an AoE taunt. It also makes Searing Pain instant, Shadow Bolt into an AoE melee cleave ability on a 6-second cooldown, and turns Curse of Wreck into a 10-second cooldown taunt. Affliction would definitely be viable with Everlasting Affliction and Haunt added. Destruction will be more fleshed out and more unique with Chaos Bolt and Incinerate. We also have some cool stuff like Lake of Fire, causing Rain of Fire to leave a Flame Strike effect on the ground, and also buff pet damage when a pet's inside it. You've got Master Channeler that turns Drain Life into an instant cast debuff and boosts its healing generation, well, the healing drain generation, by 100%, but it does increase its mana cost. You also have Demonic Grace that increases your dodge and crit chance by 30%, along with some classic TBC and Wrath of Lich King additions, like Soul Siphon, Demonic Tactics, Demonic Pack, and also weirdly you can turn your Shadow Bolt into a Shadow Bolt Volley, which is basically an AoE ability instead. Warriors will be happy to know that many of their irritating restrictions are being removed by runes. Furious Thunder, for instance, will allow a tank to finally use Thunderclap in defensive stance, but also seems to be a heavy focus on making dual wielding more powerful, most likely for PvP. Frenzied Assault increases attack speed by 20% when dual wielding, Single-Minded Fury increases your physical damage and your movement speed by 10% while dual wielding. Then there's this very overpowered ability called Consumed by Rage, which increases melee damage by 25% for 12 seconds or a max of 12 swings whenever you exceed 80 rage. Now, if this doesn't have some kind of internal cooldown, then warrior playstyle may switch to be totally different. It may be more about saving and banking on rage to obviously optimize your auto attack damage. You can combine this with another really rude sounding ability called Flagellation. Kind of sounds like something else, but anyway, which increases your physical damage by another 25% for 12 seconds. And this happens whenever you use Berserker Rage or Blood Rage. And I can see the new Endless Rage rune going well with this because it increases your rage you generate by 25%. You also have Blood Frenzy, giving free rage on your bleed effects, Raging Blow, Warbringer, allowing you to charge in combat in any stance, Victory Rush, Devastate for the Protection Warrior, and a new ability called Quick Strike, and this is a two-hander weapon only ability that benefits from all of the benefits that Heroic Strike gets. So more stuff has been data mined like Shield Reflection, like I said before, something called Gladiator Stance. Honestly, this does look a little weird, mind you, because it's apparently a shield rune and it's not associated with Warrior, but apparently it allows you to use any ability in any stance. It's apparently categorized as a proficiency, similar to how you get a proficiency to use plate armor, so maybe it's going to be a new passive ability learned at a higher level rather than an actual rune. And there we have it, my class overview for all of the new changes coming in Season of Discovery. Are you guys excited about the new rune system, or do you think Blizzard are going a little bit overboard? Let me know in the comment section below. Personally, I'm very excited. Anyway, my name is Metagoblin, until my next video, ciao.
So this is about Season of Discovery. Now, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with Season of Discovery. I'm excited, but I want to see where it evolves. We'll watch the video of Stay Safe talking about it. I'm kind of curious to hear what he has to say.
What is up, guys? Stay Safe here. So I wanted to sit down and try to pump out a quick video talking about my thoughts on the upcoming Season of Mastery Classic WoW servers that are coming out on November 30th. I'm sure you all heard about that at BlizzCon a couple days ago, in which we will be playing what is effectively a modified version of Vanilla WoW or Classic WoW with a new rune-based talent system, new abilities.
It's basically Classic Plus.
Spells, progressive level caps all along the way to level 60, starting at level 25. And then I think they said it'll be 40, 50, and 60 at most. And also retrofitted raids with new mechanics. They're turning Black Fathom Deeps, the iconic classic WoW vanilla dungeon, into a 10-man raid at level 25, in addition to some new world PvP content. So I'd like to start things off by acknowledging that this is a very experimental way to approach classic WoW, and you have to take your hat off, figuratively. If I did that in real life, I would reveal my balding head.
Yeah.
But you got to take your hat off and give it to the classic WoW dev team. They're going out on a limb here. But
they definitely are. And, you know, we'll see if the limb breaks. I'm not sure.
Result of that is we've seen sort of two camps of people right now in regards to this Season of Discovery situation. Either you love it and you love it, or you hate it and you hate it. That seems to be the case with what I've observed.
I'm going into it with a very big amount of skepticism. And I think the concerns that I have are legitimate. Like I've talked about before, how like classic WoW is good because every class isn't complete and they need other classes to complete them. And I'm not sure necessarily if Season of Discovery is going to just kind of remove that problem. And I think that's a good problem. They aren't even testing it. Yeah. And so I just want to see it. I'm in the hate camp. Well, I want them to try everything. Like, and again, all of my hesitation and everything about it, none of that outweighs the potential excitement that I could have for it, even with all of these problems.
Observed, checking all different sorts of, the far reaches of the internet. Speaking of which, if you take a look at the classic subreddit, where a lot of classic WoW community discourse goes down, those people on the subreddit seem to unanimously love it. They're huge proponents of these changes.
Most people are.
Whereas, if you look at the official Classic WoW, the BattleNet Classic WoW forums, people are pissed.
Let's be fair. These are aggregated primarily by the being the top posts that have the most interactions and the most people talking about them. This does not necessarily mean that the comment that was made at the beginning is the resounding opinion. It could also just simply mean that this is a person who is expressing an extremely strong opinion and people are reacting to it. It's important to keep that in mind.
Hate it. And so it is interesting observation, interesting to note that over here in this sort of echo chamber, I guess, everyone loves it, and over here in this alternative echo chamber, people are super angry about it, and it's nonstop vitriol. But because I was curious, I took to Twitter to see how people felt, and so I conducted a poll asking people how they feel about the upcoming Season of Discovery announcement, and here are the results. Now we have over 3,800 people that voted in this Twitter poll I conducted. It was a 24-hour-long sample size, or 24-hour-long poll, so people had an entire day to respond. 64.8 of the respondents.
Now, I will have to say that Stay Safe's audience is primarily Classic WoW players, but it is not entirely Classic WoW players. So by polling people and asking people, are you excited for Season of Discovery, there could be people who aren't even excited for Classic to begin with, who might be voting. So, you know, it's hard to be 100% certain, but I do think that I would say, I think 70 to 80% of people are positive for Season of Discovery. I think it's much higher, but there's also Classic Andes,
said that they are excited for it, whereas 35.2% of people that responded said that they are not excited. So it's almost 2-to-1 ratio, almost 2-to-1 odds. But definitely you can observe it's not unanimous. It's 2-to-1. You know, more people are excited than not excited, but is it like 90-10 or 99-1? No, this is a little bit divisive, and there most certainly is a split in the Classic WoW community to some degree. But it does seem like most people are optimistic at least, which is a good thing, especially these days. But now I want to sort of segue and give my perceived pros and cons in regards to the very controversial or perhaps divisive, definitely experimental Season of Discovery, so we can start.
And that's, I think, the key word that people have to keep in mind with Season of Discovery. Experimental. They're trying new things out. They don't know if these are going to work. That's why they're trying them.
sort of break things down, and I want to start off with the pros, the good things about Season of Discovery that maybe you're not, if you're super negative about it, maybe these are going to kind of change your mind. So I do think that between all of the new runic abilities and time-gated level caps, new metas will most certainly develop
100%.
that we have never experienced before. If you think back to the classic WoW beta, or maybe the demo that we got after BlizzCon, this is in 2019.
I remember that.
There were some really cool metas, like there was a level 30 meta, a level 19 meta, a level 40 meta on the classic WoW beta in 2019 that we had never played before. Like whoever had twinked a character at level 30 or level 40. And so there was some really cool emergent gameplay. People were sort of figuring out how to play the game in a way that has never really been done before, which is what we will be doing on Season of Discovery. Is that fun? Yeah, for some time it is. But that's most certainly one of the pros. Talent specializations that have historically been terrible might have a chance at being
very accurate picture.
Being viable. And so we're talking
very accurate.
We're talking our Boomkins, we're talking our Ret Paladins, we're talking our Prot Paladins, maybe we're talking our Affliction Warlocks, we're most certainly talking about our Shadow Priests.
Yeah.
Now these talent specializations, these sort of meme specs, as we have colloquially called them, now they stand a chance. And it's all speculation. No one really knows. Our warrior is going to be good. Our Shadow Priest's going to be the best class in the game. Our Warlock tank's going to be awesome, or are they going to be the worst tank, actually, and no one's going to bother playing them?
No,
we don't know.
Warlocks. Here's the thing about Warlocks. Warlocks are the best class in the game. So it would make sense that if you add new functionality to Warlocks, it will only make them more powerful.
It's hard to tell just by looking at the new runic abilities. You can't really parse that out just by reading.
You know what I hope they do is I hope they add in new dungeons, because like, and I'm not saying I want Mythic Plus in Classic, I don't, but I just want like a couple of dungeons maybe added at level 60 that are more challenging. And I don't even care if they don't drop gear. I just think it'd be cool to do, right? Maybe they drop cosmetics or something like that.
Reading about it on paper, I think you need to kind of get your hands on it to figure out what's going to be good and what's not going to be good. And of course, Blizzard has said that there will be no PTR and there will be no beta for this because they want to sort of maintain some of the mystery or the mystique in regards to these servers.
Exciting.
So this could be either a pretty good class balance, or it could be the worst class balance of all time.
It couldn't be worse than the actual game. It's probably going to be garbage. It will be. It's going to be garbage. It's going to be completely broken.
But, I mean, let's say it's bad class balance with all these new runic abilities once everyone is level 25 and they've acquired all their runes, that is. Was Vanilla WoW balanced ever anyway?
No, it wasn't.
I think not. So, it's like, well, are you really losing anything? It's just going to be unbalanced in a different balance, now. Maybe at worst. So, okay, whatever. We'll give it a go. Between the retrofitted raids being introduced and the additional PvP systems, we do have some amount of new, never-before-played content. Who here can say that they've done 10-man Black Fathom Deeps, that they've farmed their best-in-slot gear from 10-man Black Fathom Deeps in the new retrofitted raid? I can't say that I have, so is that going to be fun? Probably a couple times. How long is that fun going to last? I don't know. We're going to talk.
Probably a week. I think it'll be about a week. What I'll do is I'm going to level a Warlock first, and then after I level the Warlock, I'm going to level a Warrior.
About that in a minute. New PvP content, they're turning Ashen Vale into a PvP zone. When you're level 25, you can get a 50% speed mount, and you can ride that around while you're PvPing in Ashen Vale exclusively.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's unique. I've never done that before. Maybe that's going to be fun. How repeatable is that fun? How long is that sense of fun going to last? I don't know. We'll talk about that.
Probably not that long.
Also, Blizzard has come out and said that if Season of Discovery is successful, they might continue to create new content for Classic WoW.
Well, it will be. Obviously it will be. I think that we all know that people are excited for some idea of Classic Plus. Yeah, it's not Classic anymore. It's just a new game using Classic era models and zones. Well, like, I mean, you can say that. I think that what they should do... So, this, I'll draw a graph, okay? This is Classic, and this is Season of Discovery, okay? And I think that they should go to about, like, right here. But in order to go to right here, you have to find out where right here is, don't you? So I think what they should do is they should use Season of Discovery as kind of like a testing grounds to see which changes really resonate with players, and then implement them on a longer form server. Like, it's effectively like the beta test for Classic Plus begins on the 30th this month. That's how you should look at Season of Discovery. Season of Discovery is the beta test for Classic Plus.
Okay, so they said that they're open to the idea. In fact, they even...
That actually sounds kind of lit, how he describes it, yeah.
A little leak, I guess.
Then again, maybe some people want the original WoW.
Considering doing a Nomuragon raid, a Scarlet Crusade raid, and a Karazhan Crypts raid, which everyone is super excited about. So those are the pros. Okay, this is potentially could be some new, exciting content. Let's talk about the cons. Things like rogue tanks, mage healers, paladin DPSers. These are very foreign ideas in regards to vanilla WoW.
He didn't say Shaman tank.
Or at least the traditional vanilla WoW experience that many people have come to know and love over the last 19 or 20 years. Vanilla WoW came out 19 years ago. Oh my god. That means you and I are getting old. And so...
And also another factor is that all of the archetypes in the game are classic, obvious archetypes. Hunters are exactly what you would expect a ranger to be. Rogues are exactly what you would expect a rogue to be. Who can tank? The guys with plate armor and a bear.
And the shaman with the shield and
so
dagger.
like everything makes sense intuitively with classic WoW.
These are sort of very foreign ideas in regards to how vanilla WoW normally regularly plays, and it's possible that these ideas might end up, or this new sort of gameplay approach in regards to classic WoW might just be a little bit too foreign, a little bit too weird. It might deviate from what people know and love about vanilla WoW.
Right.
And people might try it out, they say, this is not vanilla WoW as I love it. It's not for me.
Yeah, sure.
That could entirely happen. It might be too different. There might be too many changes, right? A mage healer, a rogue tank, a paladin that actually can do DPS. That's insane. That's insane. That's crazy business, okay? So who knows? I also
I think that's a bit, I think it's a bit much personally. I think they should have just given paladins taunt. But, you know, I think that again, like I think it's too much, but I want to learn that it's too much, if that makes sense.
Worried that if all the content that we're getting is is a new retrofitted raid, sort of rehashed dungeons in a way, and some new world PvP content every couple months, we might end up running out of things to do really, really quickly, meaning the servers might die due to just lack of content. How fun is the level 25 PvP meta going to be? It could either be really fun and everyone loves it and it's the best thing ever, or, I don't know, I've been there, I tried that, I did it for 2 days, and now I'm bored, and I want to go back to playing hardcore WoW, or I want to go back to playing classic era, or I'm going to go log into my Drakthir and
just have some fucking like weird stuff in Goldshire with like a Volpira. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And that's the face of an average Dragonflight player, guys. And anyway, yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely a factor. It absolutely is. And they should probably expect that players will want to play about 2 characters on average. I'd say 1.5 to 2 characters on average. And then make content after that.
Go do a Mythic Plus dungeon instead. That most certainly is not going to happen. But you get my point, okay? So I'm worried about a lack of content. That's what I'm worried about. I also think that in regards to developer time, it seems, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, the Classic WoW developers are spending time developing Black Fathom Deep's level 25 10-man raid that is only going to have a shelf life for 2 months or maybe 2.5 months before they increase the level cap up to 40.
That's a concern for me as well.
And then to 50, and then to 60.
Do the raids as you level, come on.
Those raids, those new retrofitted raids that they spent time developing are now, why would you ever go back and do them, right? You're not going to...
Well, as long as they have quests that give good rewards, then people will do them. But they need to give good rewards for leveling. And that means they need to give very good experience. And I think that they might scale up. I don't think they should scale anything. Classic is not about scaling. And world buff? Yeah, there is that too. People level alts, yeah. I don't want to see them
farming
scale.
Them, you're not going to... And so maybe I'm misunderstanding something like I said, but I'm questioning, is this a good way for the developers to be spending their time in regards to making new, fun, exciting content for Classic Plus? Or is this a bad way to spend their developer time? And they always talk about...
He says, is it a bad way or a bad way? Is it no good way?
Is making content that is only going to be relevant for 2 months at most, is that a good way to spend that time? I don't know. I'm concerned about lack of content. If Season of Discovery's success, moving on, if Season of Discovery's success is the metric being used to determine whether or not Classic Plus content should be developed in the future, maybe things don't bode that well for Classic Plus. And the reason I say that is because considering how experimental and deviant Classic Discovery, Season of Discovery is going to be, I'm worried that if it's too experimental and it fails, then maybe the class...
Ooh, that was a bad hit. Oh, jeez. Ooh. Oh, remember that? That was bad. Jesus.
Classic WoW developers are going to say, well, because no one really gave a crap about Season of Discovery, we released it, no one liked it, now we have inferred that no one wants Classic Plus. If Classic Season of Discovery is to be their litmus test for the desire to play Classic Plus in the future. And so, I will say, I don't really think that Season of Discovery is what a lot of people had in mind in regards to Classic Plus.
I think also, like, one thing that we don't take into account is that there's probably a lot of classic Andes that are level 32. The same as there was back in 2006. And a lot of those classic Andes that are level 32, like, they're not, like, adding a new raid after Nax Ramas isn't important to them because they're not even level 60. Like, they don't even give a shit. It's not going to affect them. So I think for them focusing on adding more content for, like, that mid-range of players is probably a good idea. Now, is that all they should focus on? No. And I think there is a tremendous, huge community of people that are level 60. But there is always that group of people that are, you know, lower level. And it would make sense that you would do the experimental content at lower levels. Or at least that's what I would expect.
Personally, I'm sort of on the fence about Season of Discovery. I'm going to play it. I'm going to give it a go. But I will be honest with you guys. When I think of Classic Plus, I think of some tasteful class rebalancing in the spirit of Vanilla WoW. And to be a little bit more articulate when I say that.
By the way, I completely agree with Stay Safe on this. I think the changes are too far.
I was not expecting mage healers. I was not expecting rogue tanks. I was not expecting paladins to have Wind Fury. I was not expecting warlocks to be tanking raids or taking dungeons. These are a little bit, it's like whoa,
it's huge.
That's like a splash of cold water in your face. I'm not saying that I'm going to hate it, but it wasn't exactly what I was expecting when I'm talking about Classic Plus. And so, like I said, a little bit of tasteful class rebalancing or talent tree tuning in order to bring up some of those meme specs. I'm not saying I'm not saying invent new meme specs. I'm saying, like, maybe Mage Healer or something. I'm saying bring up some of the meme specs that were not really viable in original Vanilla, original Classic, okay? That makes sense to me.
Yeah, if there's a talent that nobody uses, change the talent. For sure.
My Vanilla Andy, my Classic Andy brain. Also, new leveling zones, new leveling dungeons, new endgame zones, new endgame dungeons. I think that's a pretty good place to start. I think that's a pretty... just like basic Classic Plus way to start. See if people like it or not. Give us a new level 30 to 40 leveling zone. Give us a new level 25 dungeon. Give us a new level 60 dungeon. Give us a new level 60 endgame farming zone with maybe high density resources.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Or it's like a world PvP zone with high density resources. Or I don't know, right? I think those are all sort of low hanging fruits dangling off the tree of Classic Plus that are big no-brainers in my mind that I saw a lot of people talking about. And what the Classic WoW dev team was, they cut down that tree and they grew their own tree with rogue tanks and mage healers. And so, I don't know, that new tree might be awesome, but it most certainly was not a fruit being plucked from the tree that I was expecting. I can say that.
That's exactly the way that I feel. I completely fucking agree. I think that they've, like, adding in, like, a mage tank and, like, a warlock, a mage healer, a warlock tank, and a rogue tank. Like, these are fundamental, massive deviations from, like, the base game. And I do think that it's, like, not really like Classic at all. And, again, like, I say this 50 times, but, like, that doesn't mean that I won't try it. It just simply means
Notice
that
how he didn't say Shaman
concerns
tank.
going into it.
The Shaman
And I think
tank.
that
He
Classic WoW-
admits that by not mentioning Shaman
A
tank,
lot
that
of
list of
things that
things.
Classic WoW does very
Shamans could
well.
already tank before this.
I think that these changes indicate that the developers might not fully understand why, at least I think it does them well. For example, like why players socialize out in the open world is because they can't heal as a mage. It's because they can't tank as a warlock. It's because they can't heal as a warrior. So if you can do all of those things, that socialization becomes less important. So I think they should try everything. Throw all the shit at the wall, see if all the shit sticks. But my expectation is that this will fundamentally change the game in a big way. And I don't necessarily think it will be a good thing. But I don't know.
That to be sincere. So part of me does feel like the changes of Season of Discovery are sort of out of left field.
Yeah.
Like I've said. And of
Yeah.
course this is anecdotal, but I didn't really see anyone asking for any of the changes being introduced in Season of Discovery prior to its announcement at BlizzCon a couple days ago. So I'm sort of apprehensive. Of course I'm going to play it. Of course we're going to go hard. And I
Yeah.
want to go into it with an open mind. I'm ready to have fun. I want to have fun. But it's not what I was expecting. And I'd be lying if I said otherwise. So I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I'm very curious. This is a big conversation, right? Because the future of Season of Discovery, we know, is going to dictate the future of Classic Plus. Okay?
Absolutely.
That is what we've
He's
been
right.
told by the Classic Plus
100%.
team. So please let me know what you think. Make yourself vocal and make yourself heard. Drop a comment, drop a like on the video, subscribe please while you're here, and go share the video with your friends so we can gather as much feedback as we possibly can. Thank you all for watching.
Somebody is saying we're being negative. I want to make sure that this is very understood. I'm super excited and happy about Classic Plus and Season of Discovery. I'm just offering feedback because I'm passionate about it. I'm super positive about this. I'm just offering passionate feedback and concern. That's it.
And as always, stay safe.
From my understanding, they want feedback about SOD? Yeah, I think they do want feedback. And I feel like the feedback I'm providing, I think that this is good feedback. I'll read some of the comments. Like, for example, like, this is something that I think matters. Classic WoW makes sense. Mages can't tank. Mages just do mage things. They cast fireballs.
Bro, they tank by
Warlocks
kiting like
summon
everything,
demons
my
and
dude.
cast shadow balls. Priests
They're like a
heal.
pseudo tank.
Shamans can, you know, resurrect people. Like, every class in World of Warcraft...
What?
Classic
That's all he
WoW
had to say was
makes sense.
shamans
Its
can
existence makes sense.
resurrect people. Like, bro,
Like,
there's
you can
other
think
classes
in
that
like
can
a
res.
very
Come on.
abstract way, either
They can
those
drop
classes
totems and
exist
shit.
in real life, or they exist in mythological creations of real life. Like, Merlin is like a mage, but he's, you know, it's like, is Merlin real or not? It probably wasn't casting fireballs, but that's kind of thing. You've seen warriors, right? You've seen a guy with a sword and a shield. You've seen somebody with a bow and an arrow. You know, these are classic fantasy tropes that intuitively make sense to any person that is a normal person, right? Like, you can easily assume the shamans. Like, shamans have totems in real life. Like, you go to, like, some native tribe shaman, and they're
Okay,
probably gonna
as a
cast
native-
couple of spells that could be in the spell book.
You know what?
Like, they
I'll let
try
it
to,
slide.
you know, like far sight, you know, be able to see into the past, or be able to turn into you know, a wolf or something like that. Chain lightning, not so much, but you know, other stuff absolutely. And healing, right? Healing. Think about healing, and just purify, cleanse toxins, shit like that. Yeah, exactly. Rain dance. Yeah. I feel like they went super deep in development when making Season Discovery over the last 6 months, as they saw they want for Classic Plus. My tinfoil hat idea is the level cap is there to buy them time to make it to where they can actually integrate the Classic Plus aspect in the higher indie level. Yeah, I think so too, and I feel like also like a big reason is because they want to, they just want to see what happens, right? They're using us as the beta testers. They said, oh, well, we're not going to have any beta test. Yes, you are. It begins on the 30th. Like, you have no fucking idea how this stuff is going to work. And you want to have it be low level, so it's low stakes if it's bad. That's what I think. And it's smart. I would do that. I would do that if I was them too. They're doing the right decision. People overreact about tank warlocks. I remember people wanting that ever since demon form was a thing. Yeah, but demon form was a thing in, like, Wrath of the Lich King. And,
that was like Pandaria.
Like, personally, I would be okay
or
if
Cataclysm,
warlocks
right?
could go into demon form, but I don't think that they should be tanks. Because it doesn't really make sense. Like, I don't think it makes sense. Maybe it does. Like, why? I don't know. I don't find it intuitive I don't find it intuitive to a layman. In the same way that a hunter is intuitive to a layman. I don't know, like that. Yeah, I don't know what to say. They did tank Illidan phase in BC, but it was niche. Oh, they did that in Serpent Shrine Caverns on Leotheris the Blind too. Yeah, no, you're right. Valid, your intuition counts. Yeah, I think it does. I really do. And like the good thing about Classic WoW is a lot of things in Classic WoW make sense. So like, I'll give you some examples. Okay. Things in WoW that make sense. Classes. Advantages. Disadvantages. And what I mean by make sense equals someone who has a general cultural understanding of fantasy could intuit these things naturally. It makes sense. Another thing. Gear breaks after time. This makes sense. This is so wrong and biased on your own background, Asmon. Of course it's biased on my own background. That's why I said a general cultural understanding. Cultural is based off of a person's background. That's my point. You die from fall damage. Priest heal. Actually, that's already classes. Professions. Goblin versus Gnomish engineering. Like, for example, Goblin is riskier, but it can pay off more. Gnomish is safer, but it doesn't have as many crazy effects. You eat for health. Well, think about things that are, like, exclusive to Classic WoW. Oh. You have to stand still to shoot an arrow as a hunter. You have to stop moving for a second to shoot an arrow. Now, can you shoot an arrow while running? Yes. Is it going to be accurate? Probably fucking not. Pet needs to be out of combat for you to feed it. Rogue, stealth, and stealth detection. I think this makes intuitive sense. Combat dead zone? I would argue that combat dead zone is one of the things that doesn't make sense. There's no functional reason why between 5 and 8 yards a hunter can't do anything. Like in real life, you would just shoot the arrow at the person that was 7 yards away, right? Like actually, I would say that one doesn't make sense. Armor types, you're right. Armor types and the classes that use them. Block and parry from the front. Learning weapons. Yep, weapon skill. And so I can go back and talk a lot more about these, but I hope you guys can you guys kind of see what I'm saying, right? About how a lot of things in Classic WoW make intuitive sense. Now, there are a lot of things that don't. Like resistances, yes, resistances make sense. Limited pack space, yes. Stay-Safe video is just dooming? No, it wasn't. And I can guarantee you that probably the Classic team really appreciates these videos. I bet they do. Like, they want this type of feedback. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna just, like, listen to what we're saying and be like, oh, okay, we're wrong. Well, no. But, like, they want to hear what we have to say. And so I'm saying this as a person who is excited about Season of Discovery. I'm going to play Season of Discovery, but that doesn't come with no concerns. So I have hit level 35, and McConnell started playing last night. I think we might be doing some dungeons together kind of soon. This video got people mad at Belluer. They hated him because he spoke the truth.
Hey everyone, so today I think we need to have a bit of a chat. There's almost a issue with the way that we do videos here where it's going to be like, hey, there's a new game feature, let's do a guide on the new feature. Or there's a new bit of lore, let's talk about the lore.
Naturally.
And sometimes that means that I don't really have a way to talk to you about what's actually going on, even when we all can feel that something is a little off. I feel like a lot of our content, I haven't been able to speak to like what I think a lot of you are actually feeling, right, in the Warcraft space. So it's kind of...
There's such an important thing with games, and it's the vibe check of a game. And I think that that's probably the best way that I can describe the difference between, let's say, Cyberpunk and Starfield. Is like Cyberpunk doesn't just meet the vibe check, it hits it. Whereas, like, Starfield is like, this is a video game. And if the vibe check of a game isn't there, then the game just isn't successful, and that's it. Yeah, that's it. The style, everything about it, immersion.
Kind of time to do that now. Things are a bit strange right now. I mean, by most design metrics, the narrative around WoW has been pretty
good. Look at this, bro. Like, remember back whenever, fucking that guy in Warcraft 2 held the other dude's severed head up? Remember that? And then whenever they used to, like, you know, fucking like just like torture people and shit, the orcs used to do that. Yeah. And now we have this. It's a different vibe.
Good. The team have actioned on our feedback. So why do things feel odd? I mean, I'm surely not the only person who's felt this. I kind of asked a bunch of probing questions on Twitter, right? I got like 1,850 replies. It's probably over 2,000 now. I got DMs from people who I cannot identify to you, but I like wasn't surprised. I was like, whoa, they said that too. And yes, I think a lot of us agreed that something feels a bit odd. It seems that no matter what the WoW team does, people just don't care, right?
It's because again, this is just a bunch of sissy femboy bitch stuff. Like, you go to BlizzCon, and yeah, there's like different people there, but like, the main audience is fat dudes with Horde t-shirts, wearing cargo pants, and like sandals. That's the heart of the fucking community. And now they're bald. They were walking around 10 years ago and they were balding. Now they're actually bald. And that's it. That's the heart of the community.
And that's even when right now we have more content being pumped into the game than in years. And from working in that space, like, I do get a very visceral feeling of what stuff's...
He's the only one I like, by the way. Ebonhorn is the only one I like. I think Alex Strauss is like she's hot and that's it. Like Caligos is a pussy. Nosdormo is just like a weird, is just a weirdo. Alex Straza is just like okay. Like who cares? This guy's cool, but the rest of them, who cares?
What stuff's like, as in, you know, we do content about gearing and people are like, gearing, shit and boring, don't care. You know, I get that immediate feedback.
I think also there's a problem where like WoW just has such a, like the game has been the same, really, every single patch has been the same ever since Legion. In like a very abstract sense. And I understand this might be hard for people to like think about because like obviously like 8.3 you had corruptions and like everything like that. But like really it's been the exact same thing. Like everything gets reset, you do the new raid, you do the new Mythic Plus dungeons, and then you get your Pinnacle of Gear, and then you wait for the next time for it to happen. It's formulaic, yes it is. Corruption was so fun. Corruption was fucking insane.
And you know, they say that an angry audience isn't what kills your game, it's an apathetic audience that kills your game. You know, the people just stop caring, and now you've lost the ability to reach them again.
Yeah.
I mean, by Shadowlands, people were being sucked into this black hole of apathy, right? And Dragonflight...
Well, I think that people were still mad in Shadowlands. People were definitely still mad about the game, and they were angry about Torghast, about Covenants, and everything like that. But then, like, yeah, it's apathy that killed the game. It's kind of funny to see how WoW is pussified the exact same rate as media. It's getting more and more sensitive and whiny. I unironically agree. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I fucking unironically agree. I think that there should be a rule in WoW cinematics that a character can never talk about how they feel. Never. I don't want to hear about, oh, this was stressful for me. Shut up.
It is good, but we've all felt it. It's a bit funny with videos as well.
Yeah. As remember, like, whenever Varian, on the Legion cinematic, he looks at his son, and it's just, like, absolute fucking raw masculinity. And, like, he thinks, he's like, yeah, I'm trying to build a better world for my son and for the Alliance. And he walks out on his fucking airship and he's about to go to war. And then he fucking goes to war. He fights this dude. He fucking ends up stopping a Fel Reaver, sacrifices himself. Like, what he's talking about, like, man, this is really depressing, you know? At first, I was a gladiator. I didn't remember my thoughts. Now I'm back and I can't even spend time with my son. This is depressing. Bro, what the fuck? Bro, nobody gives a fuck about this. Shut up, man. Look at Anduin. What a pussy. Come on, man. The difference is the good characters used to show you how they felt with their actions. Now the new pussy characters straight up tell you how they feel. A good example of that, and this is a recent example that I think Blizzard did do well, was that that little troll, the Zappy Boy troll, and Sarfang. Like, that one was actually good. Everything else, not having it. Garrosh did nothing wrong. I will re-emphasize the truth of that statement. If Garrosh was still the war chief of the Horde, there would be a better chance that I would be Horde right now. Garrosh did do nothing wrong. He was totally in the right. He was the best. And Garrosh should have killed Thrall and Wad. It should have happened. And I understand that the game, again, they're being pussies about it, but they should have done it. Karen did nothing wrong too? True. And to be honest, Karen would have beat the fuck out of Garrosh, right? Like, I mean, let's be real. But like, you know, he got poisoned. Yeah, Karen was a badass.
Example, normally gearing guides do pretty well on the channel. This time, the gearing is like really alt-friendly, it's pretty brisk, there's a lot of ways you can just go and do shit as a player, and it's free from a lot of bullshit that's been there in the past. Put the video out, crickets. Leveling speeds, they're super fast right now with some of the, just, you know, doing things right that we worked out in a recent video. That video comes out, crickets. But, it's not like...
Well, do you know why? It's because people are just not interested in learning how to play the game, because it's very easy. right? It's very easy to figure things out. There are so many tools to do it. And it's like, oh, how can I figure out this new system? Meet the new system, same as the old system. It's the same thing. People have done it so many times.
I'm sitting here to have a big whinge about, oh, the content's not doing well. Because I also know that the only content that we really do in this channel that actually starts to do well
is where you talk about the game and you talk about like the future of Classic Plus or something like that. Is that what he's going to say?
Is things like, say, the WoW team talking about the future of the game, like with the World Re.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
That video that came out yesterday, or the video, it was a news video where I covered Chris Mattson coming back and Ian Hazacostas commenting on it. Those clicked with people. And to me, that really does.
Is it pre-watched, or is it the fact that I made WoW content for multiple years, and I actually even made content with Bellior back in the day, and we had those exact same issues, even then? Yeah.
Say something. A lot of people are in the black hole of apathy, right? They're past the event horizon. We just can't get them back. There are still people who are on the brink, and improvement isn't what they want anymore. What they want is something that's big, because the apathy is coming for them. And like with how the leveling and gearing content did, it's the same with patch 10.2, because 10.2, actually when you go through the interviews, it has really great changes to the game. There's great work being done in classes. I mean, look at this. Ultimate Penance. My main can do that now. That's sick. But if you watch the WoWcast and you see what people's reaction...
But, like, is that as sick as whenever, for example, like, the Crucible Knight pulls out the wings in the second phase and he fucking charges in and spears you? No, it's not even remotely fucking close. It's just some floaty boy that goes up in the air with little wings. And he goes... It's like, what the fuck are we talking about? What is this?
Actions are, you just think, oh, it's all more of the same. Don't care.
Yeah.
So it's time to talk about how WoW's expansion that has the best player retention in years is somehow not translating to people wanting to come back. It's strange.
Well, yeah, because it's like you make the same game for 8 years and eventually you're going to find people that like playing it over and over. That's just how it is. It's not really a surprise, is it? I mean, damn. WoW needs someone like Ultimate or Sephiroth to destroy the planet, reset the whole shit? Well, they had somebody like that and they wasted it. WoW looks so dated. I think this looks fine. It's just the, it's the vibe, you know? It's the fucking vibe.
I think things are going to get to a better place, but first, I think we've got to go through the grim stuff. And there's one thing that's really simple. This, right now, isn't many people's definition of Warcraft.
No,
I'm not saying that's the biggest thing, but it's a lot of it. Lore, right? Setting. It kind of all devolved into esoteric bullshit, didn't it? Like, told pretty badly. I mean, Legion, what was that?
See? See? This is the way it used to fucking be. And even Legion wasn't even nearly as fucking absolute raw and masculine as something like Warlords of Draenor. Holy fuck, that was crazy. Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3.
It was the big evil demon people.
Yeah.
And the biggest invasion ever. And then we go to their homeworld and take them down. And it's all charged with, like, Illyrian, Turalian return. There's all the cool mystery stuff. Illidan's back. Velen.
Yeah, it's like, look at this. So fucking badass. Illidan blocks Turalian. Like, that was, like, such a... Like, can you imagine being a paladin and watching that cinematic? Where Illidan just blocks Turalian's blade with his hand? Bro. It's just fucking sad.
Finally going to deal with all of the crazy stuff. So if you like the Draenor, it was like, it was so good, right? It was big, you know, action movie. Shadowlands and BFA though, I mean, who really gave it to us? For a while, we all just went...
Well, here's a good question, right, with BFA. Is it if Illidan didn't get locked away in, the Pantheon with Sargeras? Do you think that fucking tree would have burnt down? Probably not. There's no way that shit would have happened if Illidan was still in the story.
It's talking
Savant
about
should be dead,
speculation,
yeah.
speculation, speculation. But then people kind of realized, hang on, where's the meat? Because WoW was never really about light, order, fell, different parts of the cosmic chart squabbling. That's not what running around as a newbie in Darkshire was.
Well, I think that to a certain degree it was. It's just that, like, it's again kind of like the problem that I was saying with like Wizards of the Coast. Whenever you get into like such an abstract form of fantasy storytelling because you're too afraid of your stories having any real life correlation, like you become so abstract in making such bland and boring stories that they're not relatable. Like, for example, look at the Onyxia questline. The Onyxia questline is very understandable, it's personal, it's about the interpersonal conflicts between people, and it's very raw. You know, there's not like this like big cosmic entity and like this struggle or whatever, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, right? Because you can have bosses like Yogg-Saron. Why is Yogg-Saron evil? Because he's in, what the fuck do you mean, why is he evil? It's an old god, like, shut up, kill him. Right? There's no nuance to this. So it's not like it can be bad, but it's just like the greater, I think that like whenever you get into like cosmic struggles and like the struggles of like different like cosmic forces, they're better told as like an abstract. And I'll give you like kind of a good example of this, I think, is Marvel, the current Marvel movies with like the Celestials, and like there is no way that they can add Galactus into the Marvel movies and have it not be a joke. It's the same as the Celestials. They're just so like, or the Living Tribunal, or some kind of like crazy abstract, hyper powerful, like massive planet devouring like entity. You just can't. It's incomprehensible. You can't, like, these things should exist, but they should exist as like a shadow. I think that's the best way I can say it. They should exist as a shadow, and they should never be directly interacted with.
It was
I think that's also one of the reasons why, sorry, I just paused fucking again. That's the other reason why I think the Lord of the Rings mythology works so well, is that you can watch Lord of the Rings and you can not know anything of the mythology of the game in any capacity. You don't know any lore. But if you learn the lore, it means more. Yeah, it's the Valar in Lord of the Rings. Yes, the Valar in Lord of the Rings. Does it matter that, like, Gandalf's real name is Olren, and he's been sent by Manwë, the Valar, to stop fucking Sauron? Like, no, it doesn't fucking matter. It's completely irrelevant. But, like, you don't interact with those characters. And they are a shadow of the story. Dork starts are born out of shit, makes them easier, not great. Yeah, it enhances the story even further. Exactly. It's Mithrandir? No, Mithrandir I think was the name that he was given by the elves, but his actual name as a Maiar spirit was Olren. Olren is Maiar name? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for trying to correct me on something about Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Better luck next time.
Even when it was touching those big things, it was about massive, unknowable gods that you'll probably never see again, that, you delve into their ruins and, you work out crazy mysteries and lore, but, like, all very grounded, It wasn't about, like, the forces of death having secret agents working in a kind of void sense who then...
I think this probably could have been fine. Like, I guarantee you that if the people that made the narrative for something like Hades made a story like this, it's a very different type of story. I bet they could have probably done a better job and the story would have been good. I actually think that, it's, again, a bad craftsman blames his tools. If you gave the From Software lore team, you gave them this story, they could make it work.
blackpilled the champion of order to turn him into a massive fell doomer so that he can stop the Void Lords from coming to claim the soul of our world that I guess, I mean, I don't know, is it a big battery? Is this a Halo ring situation?
This was the only cool part of it. This was actually so fucking cool in the cinematic. Like, whoever thought of this is a fucking genius.
Did the prophet of whatever go and travel to the Ark to turn on all Halo installations? Because that's kind of what Zereth Mortis stuff felt like. No, it was about, oh look, demons, infinite army.
Well, it's also like, you look at Halo, right? What was, in my opinion, the Halo 2, like, what the fuck moment? The moment that takes the story from being this big and makes it this big. The cinematic with Gravemind, right? Where he's holding the Arbiter and he's holding Master Chief there. And he's like, and like you finish that cinematic and you're like, what the fuck? Because you thought, you thought the game was this big and it turns out to be this big. So again, it is not the problem because it is science fiction or sci-fi or anything like that.
Insane things, the War of the Ancients, an enemy so large it was unfathomable, testing the greatest heroes of the land, creating these epic, big moments, you know, be that Varian, be that Grom dying, right? That lore that, like, it wasn't about the cosmic forces, no, it was about those characters, right? And those cool things.
Well, it's also about having characters that people like. And this is a very important fact that, like, a lot of the people that play Warcraft, I think, are guys that want to see masculine, badass characters. And I didn't like how they made Rathian seem like a pompous little bitch. At the beginning of they acted like such a weird bitch. Like, why are you acting like a weird bitch? Stop it. This isn't the Rathian I know. You're just making him act this way so it makes sense for Ebonhorn to take over the Dragonflight. Get the fuck out of here. It was so weird. He's always been a bit of a bitch, but he was more of a selfless bitch. And then it just was so, like, weird, man. Like, all the focus, like, oh, like, my pride. Yeah, Anduin punched him too hard. Yeah, maybe that was it. And it was so weird because, dude, Rathian is, like, one of the coolest characters, one of the coolest new characters. And I just think they turned him into being so one-dimensional. I didn't like that at all. And so, yeah, that happened. And then also, like, a lot of these other characters that are like, oh, this is a complex character. Well, yeah, it's a complex character, and I'm sure you'd like it if you were a femboy. The fuck is this? What is this pussy shit? What's going on? What the... Rathian didn't care about anybody except for trying to do the right thing and making problems? Yes. Rathian was a chaotic, good character.
I think what happened is the background, the speculation that we all started to have fun doing, they kind of misunderstood that and seemingly tried to make that like way more of the actual heart of the game. I mean, we all know there's order stuff going on, but like how many times in Dragonflight do characters just talk about...
They should have had Razageth have a human form because, like, bro, you know, like Razageth had a lot of kids and she was a crazy fucking bitch, right? Like, she was absolutely fucking insane. Probably one of the most insane characters Blizzard's ever made. So you fucking know she would be hot as hell, right? You definitely should have seen her human form. Yeah, she should be, like, ridiculously fucking hot.
With a capital O, and it's like...
Like a hot, big-titty
really
goth girl?
Like
100%.
Because that's how I talk about
nobody
it
else
as a
would put up with her
lore
otherwise.
YouTuber, but you, character, you exist within that world.
Yeah.
And I think where this really happened, where it really stung, it was betrayal. It was changing, like, what the world felt like and deconstructing it and replacing the cool stuff with stuff that ended up being very mid. I mean, they did quite a lot of exploiting people's feelings for marketing, and then they completely fucked up the delivery of that. I mean, take a look at Battle for Azeroth, right? We get this really cool Metzen-y cinematic. It's apparently the last thing Metzen worked on before he left Blizzard. And then what happens as soon as we get in there? Well,
he looks so good. Like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, dude, Greymane looks so fucking good in the cinematic.
for Azeroth isn't really that battle for Azeroth. They, at lightning pace, go through like 2 expansions.
Let's
worth of
go get our
material.
level 76 talent and call it a stream.
deconstruct
Get a level
and
stream.
so
It's
much
3 hours,
of the
about the average it
fundamental
takes
lore
me
that
to
people
get a
really
level
liked.
from 70
And
to 80
it's
range.
well
It's about
exploited.
3
Yeah,
hours to get a
you look
level
at, you
at
know,
least.
Oh look, Sylvanas fighting the Lich King, and it kind of sucked that, you know, Bolvar just got utterly jobbed. But you then go into Shadowlands, and Shadowlands isn't. It doesn't even do a good job of like matching the premise of its cinematic. You know, like what did Bolvar do? He did barely anything in that expansion. You know.
What has Bolvar ever done? Like, Bolvar, and the thing is, right, Bolvar was a straight-up G. Like, Bolvar was the one who called out Onyxia. He said, hold up, wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is it, right? He fucking, yeah. And so, but then he just turned into being a bitch. This was obviously, like, I think this cinematic would have been fine if there was just, like, if it made more sense. I don't even have a problem with, like, the outcome of the cinematic. I just think that the way that it was done was bad. But, like, even, and, like, the sad thing is, like, even inside of the cinematic, there was, like, a really, really good scene where, like, let's be honest, everybody thought Sylvanas was going to put the helmet on, right? Everybody thought that she was going to do it, and she held it like she was going to, then she tears it apart. I didn't fucking expect that. That was really cool.
Sylvanas, we actually didn't even get that much of Sylvanas acting as a main villain. Zovaal was kind of useless. We just did a lot of plodding around, you know?
Yeah.
Chasing the sigils. Oh no, the jailer's got the sigils. In one case, because we took it into his house. I mean...
Yeah, that was kind of a mistake, huh?
The level of messing everything up, but most importantly, taking what people loved of Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne, and then saying, but it wasn't actually that. The amount of things that Shadowlands changed, that, to so many people, was the big betrayal. It felt like...
Do you remember whenever they took the Lich King's crown and they turned it into this? This is the new Lich King crown, guys. I'm the Lich King now. Look at me. I'm the Lord of the Dead. Oh my god.
And I would say it pretty much was a bunch of people doing really bad fanfiction. But if Dragonflight is so much better, then surely those problems are solved, right? And that's the weird thing about the Dragonflight era. Compare the Dragonflight cinematic to like any other one, even the Shadowlands one. I mean, it's just, hey, happiness, dragons.
I didn't really have a problem with this cinematic that much. It's just that, like, it definitely wasn't like the same, like, look, it wasn't Warlords of Draenor. It wasn't. It was kind of dull, but yeah, it was not Warlords of Draenor. I'll tell you that.
The Stone Watcher dude who climbs up the big tower, then proceeds to barely really do anything in the game. He's not like a character or anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, we see some of Razageth, who of course we just smashed down in the first raid tier, like it did feel kind of like a whole load of nothing. And then you actually get into this expansion, and the side quests are actually pretty damn good. But once more, we're going around...
Yeah, no, the questing narrative of Dragonflight was the best that they've ever done. If you want to talk about like how it was designed and everything, it was very well done.
Some MacGuffin. Now, the Pillars of Creation were not strong, they happened in Legion. But it feels to me like, you know, oh, 5 pillars, 5 this, 5 that from Il'gynoth. Now we've got to empower the different Oath Stones. And you're just sitting there as a player being like, why am I empowering an Oath Stone? What is an Oath Stone? What if, like, something happened, and instead of going around the place turning on Oath Stones, whatever that means, we actually were, you know, like, doing cool shit? And then show don't tell, right? Like, it's one of the most simple things. Show, don't tell. And the amount of that being utterly violated by this expansion, I mean...
Yeah, like, again... Like, look at the Wrath of the Lich King cinematic. Look at the Warlords of Draenor cinematic. Look at the Cataclysm cinematic. Show, don't tell. Shit's getting fucked up.
World of Warcraft storytelling is absolutely tell instead of show. And it's like, can they not afford to show these cool things?
Probably.
Are they not interested in making like cool gameplay scenarios in the game? It's happening to the extreme. I mean, you do some basic.
All right, we call it a stream here. It's a good 3-hour stream. Got a level today. So if we're going by this pace, it'll be like another 12 hours, but like 3 hours a day type of deal for the next few days. Like,
exactly.
I'll be level 30 or level 80 right before Season of Mastery or Season of Discovery, so it'll be like perfect timing. The whole point of this character was to get it ready, so when Cataclysm comes out, I'll have a level 80 Shaman ready. So yeah, I mean, I'll probably have to gear this guy up and get him nice and geared, but I'm pretty sure the Cataclysm greens are like almost better than most of the shit that would be epic from raiding here.
Remember whenever Garrosh
So, yeah.
called Sylvanas a bitch?